Before we go anywhere near the sky, before the long bright streak, before the heat that will glass an entire hemisphere into something none of us has ever seen, hold one image steady in your mind. A mother is standing over a nest. She is older than most of her kind ever get to be, with skin the color of riverbed clay and great, calm, dark eyes set above a long, flat beak. She is a duck-billed dinosaur of a species we now call Edmontosaurus, and the nest she is standing over is a low, mounded ring of churned earth and moss and broken fern, scraped together by her own forelegs over the course of many slow, patient nights. Inside the ring lie 16 eggs, each about the size of a small melon, each warm beneath its loose covering of vegetation, each containing the soft, folded shape of something already half-formed in the dark. She has not eaten properly in days. She does not particularly want to. The eggs are warmer than the air around them, and that is the only thing in the world that matters to her. The slow, steady, living warmth coming up through the soil under her feet. In our story, we will call her the Long Mother. Not because that is her name exactly, but because it is the only name a creature like her could have. She is not a real individual. She is built from the small things real creatures left behind. A nesting colony fossilized in Montana, a clutch of stone eggs preserved with the embryos still curled inside, a juvenile skeleton found a few meters from an adult's, the bones of the smaller one tucked beneath the ribcage of the larger, as if for warmth. She is made from the residue paleontologists find when they brush dust off 66 million years. She does not know that this is the last morning. She thinks it is just a morning. The light coming through the canopy of the cycad forest behind her is the warm green gold of late spring in what we now call North America. That particular slow honey the sky gives off when the magnolias have finished blooming and the air carries the heavy sweetness of crushed pine and decaying fern. She shifts her weight gently. She listens, half listens, to the small wet sounds of the river 30 paces behind her. Somewhere in the high branches, a bird-like creature is calling to another bird-like creature, the way creatures with throats have always called to creatures with throats, demanding the world admit that morning has started. Around her, the colony is waking. Other mothers are stirring on other nests. Some are turning their eggs with a careful, blunt push of a snout. Some are settling deeper into the warm bowls of their nesting hollows. A male, larger than any of the females, his hide patterned with faint old scars from old fights about nothing, is walking slowly along the outer ring of the colony, watching. There are perhaps 200 nests in this clearing, perhaps 300. The number is too large for one mind to count. The colony has been here for many seasons. The colony has been here for longer than any of the mothers can remember, because the mothers themselves were hatched here, and their mothers were hatched here, and the bones of failed clutches and failed mothers and failed seasons lie compressed into the layers of soft black soil beneath the entire site, generation by generation, like the pages of a book no one will ever read. Behind everything, very far in the distance, beyond the river, beyond the line of horsetail thickets, beyond the green ridges of the inland sea's eastern margin, the sky is still calm. It is blue. It is the blue of any morning sky, in any spring, in any age of the world. It has a few high silver clouds drifting along its upper edge, the kind of clouds that announce nothing and threaten nothing, the kind of clouds that have moved across this same patch of planet for hundreds of millions of years, indifferent to the long parade of things growing and dying beneath them. The mother does not look up. She has no reason to look up. The sky has never been a thing that gave her anything to fear. That sky is going to kill almost everything she has ever known. But not yet. Right now it is only blue, and the Long Mother, standing over the warm, dark ring of her nest, does not look at it once. This is the story of a day. One day. Less, in some ways. The part that matters most will fit inside about 30 hours of a single rotation of a planet that, in geological terms, is barely halfway through its own long life. Creatures will wake in nests that their ancestors built 2 million years ago. Creatures will graze, drink, fight, mate, hide, hunt, sleep, dream the small, unreadable dreams that animals dream, raise their young, swim through warm, shallow seas, glide through humid forests, walk along beaches where the sand is still being made out of the broken shells of ammonites. By the time the next sunrise comes, most of them will be gone.
Not gone in the way we usually mean. Gone in a way that the word gone is barely large enough to hold. This is the story of how an ordinary morning, on an ordinary planet, on an ordinary spring day, became the most studied, mourned, replayed, and quietly haunting day in the long history of life itself. It is the story of the end of the dinosaurs, of the great forests that fell with them, of the seas that boiled and emptied, of the small, soft, frightened things that survived by being small and soft and frightened. It is also, more uncomfortably, a story about how thin the floor of normal life always is, in every era, on every world, including this one. Tonight, slowly, calmly, we are going to walk through that day. Not as a list of facts, not as a documentary recap, as a long, careful, immersive descent into the most consequential single day the planet ever recorded. We will stand at the edges of nesting colonies. We will hear the wet sound of a triceratops drinking from a pond. We will follow a hunter through the steam at dawn. We will watch the first thing in the sky that should have made every animal on Earth run, and we will watch them, instead, go on doing what animals do. We will follow them into burrows, into shallows, into thickets and cave mouths, and the long corridor of accidents that will turn most of them into a thin black layer of carbon in the rocks beneath our feet. And from time to time, throughout this long night, we will return to the clearing, back to the long mother, back to the nest, back to the warm, small, ordinary universe she does not yet know she is losing. Because before the sky, there is the morning, and before the morning, there is the world. So let us begin where the ending begins. Not in the sky, not in the asteroid that, even now, is still half a day away from impact, falling toward Earth at 20 kilometers per second through a vacuum that has no idea what is about to happen. Let us begin on the ground. In a forest that did not believe it could die. The world she stands in is old. By the time we step into it, the planet has already been carrying life for nearly 4 billion years. The continents have moved many times. The oceans have opened and closed. There have been deserts where there are now seas, and seas where there are now mountains, and ice ages and warm ages, and ages so long and slow that no human time word is large enough to hold them. The dinosaurs themselves are old. Their lineage stretches back through the Jurassic, through the Triassic, into a time so remote that even the early dinosaurs would have seemed, to the Long Mother, almost as alien as we would seem to her. By the time of our morning, dinosaurs have been the dominant land vertebrates of the planet for around 160 million years. 160 million years. That number is so large that the mind does not really hold it. We can think we hold it. We cannot. To put it into something the mind can almost grip, consider this. The pyramids of Giza were built about 4,500 years ago. The first cities of Mesopotamia were built about 10,000 years ago. The earliest cave paintings are about 40,000 years old. The earliest modern humans appeared about 300,000 years ago. The earliest of our ancestors who could walk upright appeared roughly 4 million years ago. The earliest mammals appeared roughly 200 million years ago. The dinosaurs, as a group, have been ruling the surface of the Earth for nearly 800 times longer than recorded human history. They are not new. They are not a flash. They are the most successful large terrestrial vertebrates the planet has ever produced, and they have been successful for so long that, in any sane geological sense, they are simply how the world is. When the Long Mother looks up from her nest at the world around her, she is looking at the result of that immense success. She is looking at the Late Cretaceous. The Late Cretaceous is not the world you imagine when you hear the word dinosaur, unless you are very careful with your imagination. There are no swamps full of brontosaurs because the brontosaurs lived in a different geological chapter and have been dead by her morning for many tens of millions of years.
There is no Allosaurus stalking through the trees. The Stegosaurus is not standing at the water's edge with its plates lit by sunset. All of those creatures, the ones from the books we read as children, the ones from the toys we played with on the carpet, have already lived their entire stories. They have come, persisted, died out, and been replaced. The dinosaurs of the late Cretaceous are themselves the descendants of those earlier dinosaurs, the way we are the descendants of our great-grandparents. They are not the same animals at all. They are the chapter you are most likely never to have heard the full names of, except for one or two. Triceratops lives in this world. Tyrannosaurus rex lives in this world. These two are the famous ones. They are the figureheads. They walk the same forests, in the same season, on the same day. The Long Mother knows them both. She has, in her long, unconcerned life, seen Triceratops drink at the same river bend she now nests near. She has, in her younger years, run from a Tyrannosaurus once, in the foggy morning of a long-ago spring, when one of the great hunters had been startled by something and come crashing through the trees too close to her trail. She still remembers, in some dim animal way, the feeling of running, the weight of her body shifting from leg to leg, the burn in her chest, the sound of the great hunter not following because something else, somewhere, had distracted it. But the late Cretaceous is so much more than those two. It is a world thick with diversity. There are herds of hadrosaurs of many species. There are armored ankylosaurs with bone-tipped tails. There are the small, fierce dromaeosaurs, the so-called raptors, traveling in pairs and small family groups, intelligent, watchful, feathered. There are the strange, long-clawed therizinosaurs, half-giant sloth in form, gentle vegetarians despite their nightmare hands. There are oviraptors, brooding their nests in the postures their cousins the modern birds will inherit from them. There are pachycephalosaurs with their domed, reinforced skulls, ramming each other in slow rituals across open ground. There are titanosaurs in some regions, vast, long-necked beasts whose footsteps still shake the earth 100 meters from where they are walking. There are crocodiles in the rivers, some of them small, some of them enormous, some of them able to take a hadrosaur calf in one slow sideways snap. In the skies, there are pterosaurs, not little ones mostly. The little pterosaurs of the earlier eras have largely been replaced, in the late Cretaceous, by their giant cousins. There are pterosaurs with wingspans the size of small aircraft, gliding for hundreds of kilometers on the rising thermals of warm coastal air. The largest of them, the Quetzalcoatlus and its kin, stand as tall as a giraffe when they are on the ground, their long necks tipped with daggered beaks, their leathery wings folded along their bodies like collapsed sails. They are alien in a way that nothing alive today is alien. There is nothing on Earth in our age that is anything like them. In the seas, there are mosasaurs. The seas of the late Cretaceous are warmer than ours. The polar ice is not yet formed. The continents are shaped differently. There is a great shallow inland sea splitting North America in half, a sea called by modern geologists the Western Interior Seaway, where the Long Mother's colony lies near the eastern shore of the western half of that continent. The waters of that sea are full of creatures we would scarcely recognize. Mosasaurs, enormous swimming lizards, 12 and 15 meters long, propelling themselves with great paddled tails and snatching anything that moves. Plesiosaurs, long-necked or short-necked according to species, gliding through deeper waters. Sharks of many sizes, some of them ancestors of forms still alive today, some of them branches that will not survive. Ammonites in their coiled shells, the size of dinner plates, the size of car tires, drifting through warm currents. Turtles the size of small cars. Fish of countless kinds. And under everything, everywhere, the small things, the mammals. There were mammals in the late Cretaceous. People sometimes forget that. People imagine that mammals appeared after the dinosaurs were gone, the way one tenant appears after another tenant has moved out. That is not how it happened. The mammals were already there. They had been there for the entire reign of the dinosaurs. They had appeared at about the same time as the earliest dinosaurs, perhaps even slightly earlier, and they had been living in the shadows of those giants for all of that time, never growing larger than a badger, never daring to leave their burrows during the day, never developing the size or the boldness that their descendants would eventually inherit. They were small. They were furred. They were warm-blooded. They were nocturnal, mostly, because the day belonged to other things. They had eyes adapted for low light. They had ears adapted for the small sounds of insects and seeds. They had hearts that beat very fast. They had brains that, for their size, were already remarkably developed, because being small and clever in a world of big and powerful things is the only career that has ever worked, anywhere, on any planet. They were our ancestors. Not all of them. Most of the mammal lineages of the Late Cretaceous would also die in the coming hours, but some of them would not. Some of them, by some combination of luck and burrow depth and tolerance for cold and ability to eat almost anything, would crawl out of the long darkness when it was over and inherit a world they had never been allowed to walk in. From those few small survivors, in time so long that it is barely worth describing in human terms, would come every mammal that has ever lived since, which means every cat, every dog, every elephant, every whale, every horse, every mouse, every monkey, every bat, every human being who has ever drawn breath. The mammals of the Late Cretaceous do not know that they are the ancestors of anything important. They do not know anything except hunger, fear, the smell of soil, and the brief sleep of small things. But they are there. In the burrows under the roots of the cycads behind the long mother's nest, a few of them are sleeping right now. A small furred creature, the size of a rat, is curled in a tight ball inside a tunnel she dug herself last winter. Around her, her young are also curled, 2 of them, weaned but not yet ready to leave. She does not know that the planet is about to change. She does not know about asteroids, or pyroclastic flows, or thermal pulses, or impact winters, or extinctions. She knows that the soil is warm. She knows that the egg of a small reptile, eaten yesterday, was filling. She knows that there is a strange tremor sometimes in the ground above her when the larger animals walk past. She knows that the day is dangerous and the night is hers. She is one of the survivors. She does not know it yet, but she is. So picture the world now as it is on this morning. The forests are not the dark coniferous forests of the modern north. They are not the broad temperate forests of the modern middle latitudes. They are something stranger. They are mixed forests, with flowering plants among the older lineages, with magnolias and palms and ferns and cycads and primitive grasses and the early ancestors of the trees we know today. Many of the plants in this forest are species that will not survive what is coming. Some will. The redwoods will. The ginkgos will. The ferns especially will. A few species of ferns are, even now, lining the shaded ground of the colony, and within months they will be among the only green things visible anywhere on the planet, having reclaimed a world emptied of almost everything else. The air is warm. The climate of the Late Cretaceous is warmer than ours. There are no polar caps. Tropical forests grow in places that today are tundra. Crocodiles live in places that today are frozen for half the year. The continents are not yet in their modern positions. The Atlantic Ocean is younger and narrower. India is still a separate landmass moving slowly northward. Australia is still partly attached to Antarctica, which is, itself, still warm and forested. The world is older and stranger and softer than we are used to imagining. In this softness, the dinosaurs have built their long success. They are not the lumbering reptiles of 19th century museum dioramas. They are warm-blooded, or close to it. They are fast. Many of them are feathered, especially the smaller ones, the predators, the ones that resemble large, strange birds more than they resemble lizards. Some of them care for their young with a tenderness that, in older books, was reserved for mammals. The long mother on her nest is not an exception. She is a representative. The hadrosaurs nest in colonies with attentive parental care. The oviraptors brood their eggs exactly the way modern hens brood theirs. The Tyrannosaurus rex, in some sites, has been found near other Tyrannosaurus rexes in ways that suggest at least loose family structure, perhaps even cooperation. The world she lives in is not a slow, swampy place full of dull-eyed monsters. It is a world of intelligent, social, sometimes nurturing creatures who have built, over 160 million years, the most successful land vertebrate community the planet has ever seen. And it is, right now, only hours from ending. The morning is moving toward noon in her clearing. The sun is high enough now to glint off the river. The temperature is rising, the way it rises in any late spring morning in any age. A few of the other hadrosaur mothers have stood and stretched. Some are wandering, briefly, to the edge of the clearing to graze the new growth on the ferns. Some are drinking at the river. One of them, a young female with paler flanks, is being courted, half-heartedly, by a young male who has not yet learned the timing of these things. The colony is moving through its morning rituals. The long mother does not stand. She has stood already, earlier, and walked the perimeter of her nest, and pushed at the loose earth with her snout to test the warmth. She does not need to do it again. She has been at this work for many seasons. She knows the warmth is right. She lowers her head, slowly, and rests her chin on the curved rim of the mound. From this position, she can see the eggs without moving. She can hear them, almost, if the air is still enough. Sometimes, in the last days before hatching, a faint scraping sound comes from inside. A claw shifting, a snout pressing, a young one beginning to test the walls of its small, dark world. It is not those last days yet. The eggs are perhaps a week away. She is patient. Patience is the texture of her life. She has been patient for half a year, since the laying. She has been patient through cool nights and warmer ones, through storms and rain, through one early visit from a curious predator that turned away when she stood up and showed her full height. She will be patient for one more week, and then, in some sequence she has never been able to plan but has always trusted, the eggs will move, the shells will crack, and the small, wet, awkward shapes of her young will struggle out into the air. 16 of them. That is the typical number for her species. That is the typical number for her colony. Most of the 16 will not survive their first year. Predators will take some. Disease will take others. Crocodiles will find a few at the water's edge. Storms will sweep some away. Most years, of 16, perhaps 2 reach their second spring. That is the arithmetic of being a hadrosaur. That is the arithmetic of being a parent in a world that does not yet know it can be ended in a single afternoon. This is what we mean when we say the long mother does not know. She does not know about probability in the way a human would. She does not know that she is one of millions of mothers, in millions of nests, across thousands of species, in countless ecosystems, all of whom are running the same patient calculation. She does not know that she is part of a system. She does not know that the system has been running for 160 million years. She knows, only, the small, warm, wet, specific reality of her own 16 eggs. That is enough. That has always been enough. That is, in some way, the truest definition of being alive that has ever existed on this planet. Not the abstract grasp of the system, not the awareness of the long picture, only the warm, specific reality of one's own small bowl of eggs, one's own small clutch of young, one's own small radius of meaning around a thing that depends on you. The long mother sighs. It is not a human sigh. It is something more like a soft, deep exhalation, the air of her enormous lungs moving slowly out through her nostrils, fluttering a few dead leaves at the edge of the nest. But in any language a person might want to use, what she does in this moment is, exactly, sigh. She closes her eyes. She is warm. She is calm. She is content. The sun is on her back. The river is murmuring behind her. Her young are inside their shells. The colony is around her. The forest is humming. The world, in this single specific moment, is exactly as it should be, and she is exactly where she belongs in it. This is the last morning. This is, in some sense, the last good moment that her kind will ever have. She has no idea. It is worth pausing here before we go any further to talk about the thing that is coming, because the thing that is coming is, in many ways, the most important object that has ever entered the orbit of our planet, and most of us do not think about it for more than a few minutes a year. We have grown up with the knowledge that an asteroid killed the dinosaurs, in the way that we have grown up with the knowledge that the Earth is round. It is a fact we keep. It is not, for most of us, a fact we live in. The fact, when you live in it, becomes terrifying. The asteroid that will, in a few hours, hit the Earth is somewhere between 10 and 15 kilometers across. Most modern estimates suggest something close to 10 or 11 kilometers, although the upper end remains possible. The exact size does not particularly matter for our purposes because the lower end and the upper end of the range produce more or less the same outcome, only with slightly different timetables. What matters is that it is large. 10 kilometers is large. You can drive across 10 kilometers in a few minutes on a highway. You can fly across 10 kilometers in less than a minute in a passenger jet. 10 kilometers is the distance from the center of a moderate-sized city to one of its suburbs. 10 kilometers as a length is unremarkable. 10 kilometers as the diameter of a solid stone object moving at 20 kilometers per second is not unremarkable. It is, more or less, the largest single energy event that has ever happened on the surface of this planet during the existence of complex life. Larger things have hit the Earth before. In the very early days of the solar system, when the planets were still being assembled out of the leftover dust of the Sun's formation, the Earth was struck by an object roughly the size of Mars, and that collision is, in current theory, what produced the Moon. There were other immense impacts in the first billion years. There may have been some in the second billion. But by the time of complex life, by the time of the dinosaurs, by the time of the long mother on her nest, the solar system had largely cleaned itself out, and impacts of this size were no longer routine. This impact is not routine. This impact is, for all practical purposes, the worst single thing that has ever happened to the world she lives in. Right now, at the moment we are watching her, the asteroid is still very far away. It is not yet visible. It is moving through the empty space between the orbits of Earth and the rest of the inner solar system, on a course that has, for tens of millions of years, been slowly bending toward this particular point on this particular morning of this particular spring. It has no name. It will never have a name. The crater it leaves will be called Chicxulub, after the small town in modern Mexico beneath which its scar still rests, buried under 100 meters of younger sediment, invisible from the surface, detectable only by careful analysis of gravity and magnetism and the patient drilling of cores. But right now, it is just an object. A dark, heavy lump of stone and iron and water ice, perhaps a fragment of a larger asteroid that broke apart in some collision in the asteroid belt millions of years ago, perhaps a stray piece of the early solar system that has been wandering ever since. It is cold. It is, by the standards of solar objects, small. It is, by the standards of cities, enormous. It is moving in a straight line that has, until very recently, not particularly threatened anyone, because there is so much space between objects in the solar system that nearly all rocks move past nearly all planets and never come close. This one is not nearly all rocks. This one is the rock that, for whatever combination of accidents in the long bookkeeping of orbital mechanics, has aligned itself with Earth's path. It will not miss. There is a particular kind of cosmic loneliness that lives in the fact of an unstoppable object. The Long Mother does not know about it. No one in her world knows about it. None of them, even the most intelligent of the dromaeosaurs, even the most patient of the elder triceratopses, has the conceptual framework to know about it. It would not matter if they did. There is nothing they could do. The asteroid, by this point in the morning, is moving on a trajectory that has been locked for centuries. Even if every dinosaur on Earth knew about it, and even if every one of them spent the rest of the morning running, there would be nowhere to run. This is the great horror at the heart of the day, and the great quiet underneath it. The horror is the unstoppable nature of the thing. The quiet is the fact that, because it cannot be stopped, the morning continues exactly as it would have continued anyway. The hadrosaurs go on tending their nests. The triceratopses go on grazing at the river's edge. The Tyrannosaurus rex, somewhere a few kilometers from the colony, is sleeping in a thicket after a heavy meal of a young Edmontosaurus he caught yesterday afternoon. The pterosaurs are riding the morning thermals along the coast of the Western Interior Seaway, 300 kilometers from where the Long Mother sleeps. The mosasaurs are hunting in the warm, shallow waters above what will, in geological time, become Kansas. The little furred mammals are dreaming in their burrows. The ammonites are gliding through their last morning in the ocean. The pollen grains of late spring flowers are drifting through the air, attaching to wings and feathers and fur and the long, flat beaks of duck-billed dinosaurs. The whole world is doing what it does. The whole world is, in this last morning, exquisitely itself. That is what makes the story so painful to tell. Not that it ends. Things end. Empires end. Species end. Worlds end. Endings are part of the structure of time. What makes it painful is that it ends without ever knowing what was happening to it. It ends in the middle of an ordinary spring. It ends with mothers on nests, and grazers at rivers, and hunters in thickets. It ends in the middle of life, because there is no point at which any of these creatures could possibly have stopped living long enough to notice they were about to. This is what we mean when we say, of the dinosaurs, that they were taken by surprise. Not by the sudden flash of light, not by the heat, not by the long winter, by all of it. By the entire structure of an event whose scale was so far outside their experience that they had no nervous system, no instinct, no memory, no inheritance that could have prepared them for it. They were taken by surprise the way every living thing is taken by surprise by its own death, except worse, because they were taken collectively, in the millions, in the billions, on the same morning, by the same cause, on a planet none of them owned, but all of them shared. The morning continues. The sun is now well past its mid-morning position. The light through the cycad canopy has shifted from green gold to something paler and brighter, the high white light of true late morning. The shadows of the leaves on the dirt have grown sharper. The temperature has continued to rise. Some of the older hadrosaurs in the colony have moved into the shaded edge of the clearing to cool themselves. The Long Mother has not moved. She is built for sun. She does not mind the heat. She is content. In another part of the same forest, perhaps a kilometer to the east, a small herd of triceratops is moving through the undergrowth. The triceratops is the other great icon of this final chapter of dinosaur life. It is enormous, 6 or 7 meters from snout to tail, with a great bony frill that rises behind its head like a shield. The frill is decorated, in many individuals, with bright skin patterns, the way modern lizards have bright skin patterns at the back of their throats and necks. The frill is used for display mostly, for looking impressive, for announcing one's age and health and readiness to mate or to fight. It is also, in some encounters with predators, used defensively, although less so than people sometimes imagine. The real defense of the Triceratops is its 3 horns, 2 long ones above its eyes, 1 shorter one over the nose, all of them sharp and heavy. A Triceratops can kill an adult Tyrannosaurus in the right circumstances. There are fossils that suggest this exact outcome has occurred. They are not common because Tyrannosaurus is also formidable, but they are not impossible. This herd of Triceratops is moving slowly. There is a large old bull at its center, with horns so heavy and curved that they almost meet over his head. There are 3 females. There are 5 juveniles, 2 of them only a few months out of the egg, the others perhaps 2 or 3 years old. They are eating their way through a thicket of ferns. The ferns are tender at this time of year. The juveniles are eating eagerly. The adults are eating more carefully, because they know that overgrazing this thicket today means they will need to walk farther tomorrow. The old bull does not know about tomorrow. There will be no tomorrow. He is, in some way, the most ancient creature in this entire forest. He is older than the Long Mother. He is older than most of the Tyrannosaurus rexes. He has lived for nearly 40 years. He has fathered, in his time, dozens of young, almost all of whom have died young, the way young Triceratops always have died young, eaten by predators or carried off by floods or weakened by parasites and quietly given up. He has survived 2 serious wounds, one from a Tyrannosaurus encounter in his youth, one from a fight with another bull over a female he no longer remembers. The scars on his flanks are pale and old. The horns on his head have been broken and regrown. The frill behind his head has chipped at the edges. He is, by any animal definition, magnificent. He raises his head, briefly, to look around. His eyes are large and dark and intelligent. He sees the forest. He sees his small family. He sees the path they have come along. He sees the river in the distance through the trees. He does not see anything wrong. The morning is ordinary. The morning is fine. He lowers his head and goes back to eating. This is what extinction looks like from the inside. It does not look like extinction. It looks like a morning. It looks like an old bull eating ferns with his family around him, lifting his head to check the world, finding nothing of interest, lowering his head again. It looks like 160 million years of slow, successful evolution producing this exact creature, in this exact moment, doing exactly the thing his ancestors have done for unthinkable spans of time, completely unaware that the structure underneath his life is about to fall. That is, in some sense, the unbearable thing about telling this story. The dinosaurs are not, on this morning, doing anything wrong. They are not failing. They are not weakened. They are not in decline. The old debate, which used to dominate paleontology, about whether the dinosaurs were already dying out when the asteroid hit, has been largely settled. The current evidence is overwhelming. The dinosaurs were thriving. They were diverse. They were spreading into new ecological niches. They were producing new species in many regions. There is no sign, in the rock record, of any general crisis in dinosaur populations in the millions of years leading up to the impact. In every meaningful biological sense, they were doing fine. The Tyrannosaurus rex had only appeared a few 100,000 years before the impact, evolutionarily speaking, in its modern form. The Triceratops was at the peak of its success. The hadrosaurs were the most numerous large herbivores the planet had ever seen. They were not on their way out. They were ambushed. This is, perhaps, the most important shift in the modern understanding of the extinction. For a long time, in the popular imagination, the extinction of the dinosaurs was framed as a kind of inevitability. They were big. They were old. They were primitive. They were on the way out. The asteroid was just the final blow, the way the last cough is the final blow to a dying person who has already been ill for years. That picture is wrong. The dinosaurs were not ill. The dinosaurs were not declining. The dinosaurs were not, in any sense, ready to die. They were ambushed by something that had nothing to do with their biology, their behavior, their ecological choices, or their evolutionary trajectory. They were, on the morning of our story, doing exactly what they had been doing for 160 million years. And what they had been doing for 160 million years had been working magnificently. They were not punished by the universe for being old or wrong or slow. They were the unlucky victims of an accident in orbital mechanics. That is, in some ways, harder to bear than the alternative. It would be almost comforting to think that extinction is a form of judgment, that the dinosaurs went away because they were no longer fit, that there is a moral arc to evolution which decides who lives and who dies. There is not. There is, instead, only the long, indifferent calculation of physics, in which a stray rock the size of a city happens to be on the same trajectory as a planet, and there is no court of appeal, no warning, no justice. The dinosaurs were not bad at being dinosaurs. They were perfect at being dinosaurs. It just did not matter. We will return now to the colony. The long mother is still on her nest. The sun has continued its slow climb. It is, by now, almost directly overhead, although her clearing receives only filtered light through the canopy. The temperature has reached its midday warmth. Some of the other hadrosaurs have lain down in the shadow of the larger trees, only their heads visible above the ferns. The juveniles of the colony are quiet, mostly, in the heat. The young male who was clumsily courting earlier has given up and is sleeping in a patch of sunlight at the colony's edge, his long bill resting on his forelegs. This is the quietest hour of the day. This is the hour when the air seems thickest, when the light seems heaviest, when the sounds of the forest reduce themselves to the slow background music of insects and water and the occasional distant call of some larger animal that the colony has come to ignore. This is the hour in which the Long Mother does, for the first time today, look up. She does not look at the sky. She looks at the canopy, at the green pattern of leaves and branches over her head. She looks at the small dark shapes of pollinating creatures moving among the high flowers. She looks at the slow drift of a high cloud beyond the leaves. She has been on her nest more or less continuously for many days. Her muscles ache, in the slow background way that muscles ache when they have not been used in a while. She rolls her head, slightly, to one side. She blinks. She lowers her head again. Above the canopy, above the cloud, above the thin pale blue of the morning sky, something has begun to be visible. It is not yet a fireball. It is, for now, only a small white streak. It looks, to the few high-altitude creatures who happen to be paying attention, like a meteor, a bright, fast line across the sky. There are meteors all the time. There are meteors every night. The pterosaurs have seen them many times, in their long, high flights. The small flying things have ignored them since their lineage began. A streak in the sky is not unusual. This streak is unusual. This streak is brighter than any of them have ever seen. This streak is wider. This streak is followed, after a few seconds, by a second streak, the air itself heating around the object as it punches through the atmosphere, becoming a corridor of plasma. The streak grows. It expands. It begins, within seconds, to throw off light brighter than the sun. The pterosaurs, who are still kilometers from the impact site but in line of sight, see it first. The hadrosaurs in the colony do not see it. They are under the canopy. Their world is leaves and earth and the warm, specific reality of nest. The Long Mother does not see it. She is dozing, half asleep, in the still heavy heat of the late morning, her chin resting on the rim of her nest, her eyes closed. The streak grows. The pterosaurs begin to make distressed calls. A few of the larger animals in the forest stop chewing. They lift their heads. Something in the air has changed, although they do not know what. A pressure. A faint sound that is not yet sound, more like a sense of something coming. The Triceratops bull, a kilometer away, raises his head and stares at the canopy. He does not see anything. He stares anyway. He is, in his old animal way, beginning to feel afraid for the first time in years, and he does not know why. The streak grows. It is now visible from horizon to horizon for any creature with a clear view of the sky. It is bright enough to throw shadows. It is bright enough that the pterosaurs, looking directly at it, are blinded for the rest of their short lives. The air at the leading edge of the object has reached temperatures far hotter than the surface of the sun. The atmosphere is being shocked, parted, set on fire, pushed aside in a great curving wave that will produce, in moments, the loudest sound the world has ever made. The streak grows. And then, off the far southern horizon, in a place that the Long Mother has never been, that none of her ancestors have ever been, that no creature on her continent has ever been, the sky comes apart. It does not come apart slowly. It comes apart in the time it takes the human eye to blink. There is a flash. It is impossibly bright. It is brighter than anything any living thing has ever seen. It is brighter than the sun, in the same way that the sun is brighter than a candle. For a fraction of a second, the entire visible hemisphere of the planet is lit by a second sun, larger and brighter and lower in the sky than the real one. And that second sun is the asteroid making contact with the surface of the Earth, somewhere on the edge of what will, in 100 million years, be called the Yucatan Peninsula. The Long Mother does not see the flash directly. She is too far north. The flash itself is below her horizon. But the sky above her, even the small piece of it visible through the canopy, brightens suddenly, as if a lamp has been lit above the clouds. She opens her eyes. She lifts her head. She does not know what she has seen. She has just seen the moment that ends her world. It will take some time for the rest of the ending to reach her. She has a few more hours of her life left. We will walk through them with her. We will walk through them slowly, because they are, in some sense, the most important hours that have ever passed on this planet, and they deserve a slow telling. But before we follow the long mother through her last afternoon, we need to understand what has just happened, very far to the south, in a stretch of warm, shallow sea that, at this moment, has just ceased to exist. We need to understand the impact. We need to understand what an asteroid the size of a city does to a planet the size of Earth when it arrives at the speed of 20 kilometers per second. The asteroid does not exactly hit the ground. That is the first counterintuitive thing about it. The asteroid hits the atmosphere first. The atmosphere of the Earth is thick enough near the surface that an object this large, traveling this fast, cannot simply pass through it. The asteroid carves a hole in the air on its way down. The hole is roughly the diameter of the asteroid itself, 10 or 11 kilometers across, and the air at the leading edge of that hole is compressed so violently that it heats to temperatures of tens of thousands of degrees. This is not metaphor. This is physics. The air becomes plasma. The plasma glows white and yellow and ultraviolet. The asteroid arrives at the surface of the ocean, enclosed in a sheath of incandescent gas hotter than anything else on the planet at that moment. It enters the ocean. The water of the Gulf of Mexico at the impact site is shallow, perhaps 100 meters deep, perhaps less. The asteroid passes through this layer of water in something less than a second. Most of the water in the path of the impact in that second does not have time to move. It is heated to plasma along with the air. The water that was there a moment ago is, by the next moment, a vapor, expanding outward at speeds the human mind has no useful analogy for. The asteroid hits the seabed. The seabed is sedimentary rock, limestone mostly, made over tens of millions of years by the slow accumulation of the calcium shells of small marine creatures. It is, by geological standards, soft. It is not soft enough. When the asteroid hits, the rock at the point of impact is not crushed. It is vaporized. The compressive forces are so great that solid rock, kilometers below the original seabed, is heated past its melting point and past its boiling point and turned into vapor in milliseconds. The asteroid itself, which is solid stone and iron, is also vaporized in the same instant. The collision is so violent that neither object survives it. There is no asteroid lying at the bottom of a crater somewhere. There is only the crater and the cloud of vaporized rock and iron expanding outward in a fireball that immediately consumes the immediate vicinity. The crater forms in less than a minute. It is, when it finishes forming, roughly 180 kilometers across. 180 kilometers. That is the distance between two reasonable cities. That is the diameter of a small country. That is, in any human geographic sense, a stretch of landscape that you would consider a region. The crater is gouged out of the rock in the time it takes a human being to inhale, exhale, and inhale again. The bedrock is folded back on itself. The crust of the Earth, briefly, behaves like a liquid. Concentric rings of rock rise and fall around the impact site as the energy propagates outward. The Earth itself, the whole planet, rings like a bell. The energy released, in standard human terms, is approximately 100 million megatons of TNT. That number is not, again, a number the mind holds easily. The largest nuclear weapon ever detonated, the Soviet test of the Tsar Bomba in 1961, released about 50 megatons. The Hiroshima bomb, by comparison, released about 15 kilotons, or 15 thousandths of a megaton. The Chicxulub impact released approximately 100 million megatons. That is the energy equivalent of approximately 2 million Tsar Bombas, all going off in the same place at the same instant in a single fraction of a second. This is, by any measurement, the largest single energy event the Earth has experienced in the entire age of complex life. The fireball at the moment of impact is approximately several thousand kilometers across at its widest. It is brighter than the sun. It is hotter than the sun at its core, although briefly. It rises from the impact site like a slow vertical wall, climbing into the atmosphere, pushing aside the air. The air pressure at the leading edge of the fireball is so great that the air itself becomes a shock wave, propagating outward at the speed of sound, then faster than sound. The shock wave reaches the coastline of what will become Mexico within seconds. The coastline ceases to be a coastline. Every living thing within roughly 500 kilometers of the impact site is dead within about 10 minutes. We will talk in more detail later about what kinds of deaths these are. They are not all the same. Some are immediate, some are slower, some are simply collapses of body, of breath, of the systems by which living things stay alive. But within the first 10 minutes, the entire region we now call Central America and the southern half of what we now call North America has been changed beyond recognition. The flash itself, the visible light from the fireball, propagates at the speed of light. It reaches every line of sight horizon, everywhere on Earth, within tens of milliseconds. From the Long Mother's perspective, the flash arrives essentially the moment the impact occurs. The sound, by contrast, will take much longer. The shockwave, the ground tremor, the wind, the rain of glass that will eventually fall from the sky over half the planet, all of these are slower. They will reach her over the next few hours, in a sequence she will experience as a series of escalating wrongness. But the flash arrives first. She has already seen it. Or rather, she has seen the brightening of the canopy that the flash caused. She has seen the cycad leaves above her, lit suddenly from above, glow as if a second sun had risen behind them. She has seen the small bright reflections on the wet bark of the nearest trees. She has seen, without understanding what she has seen, the first signal that the planet she lives on is no longer the planet she lives on. She is, in the moments after the flash, simply confused. The forest around her is silent. It is not the ordinary silence of a calm midday. It is a sudden silence, a stopped silence, the silence of every animal in earshot pausing at the same instant. The insects have stopped. The small flying things have stopped. The other hadrosaurs in the colony have lifted their heads. The pterosaurs that were drifting on the morning thermals have begun to descend in unsteady spirals, their eyes burned, their air sense disrupted. Somewhere a few kilometers away, the old Triceratops bull has gone still, his great head raised, his ancient eyes wide. Somewhere in a thicket, the Tyrannosaurus rex who was sleeping has woken with a low growl and risen to his feet. The flash has ended. The afterglow is fading. The sky, where it can be seen through the canopy, is white. Not bright sky white, a different white, a whiter white, the white of high cloud lit from beneath. It is brighter than the sun. The forest is, somehow, brighter than it was a moment ago, although the sun is not in any unusual position. The Long Mother stands. She does not know why she is standing. She is, for the first time in many days, off her nest. She turns, slowly, looking at the canopy, looking at the trees, looking at the river. She listens. She feels. There is something. There is a feeling under her feet that she has felt before, in faint forms, in the small tremors that sometimes pass through the soil. There is a feeling in her chest that she has felt before, in the early stages of great storms, when the air is pressing down on the world and the rain has not yet started. It is not exactly either of those. It is something new. She does not know what it is. She is a hadrosaur. She has the cognitive equipment of a hadrosaur. She is capable, in her way, of love, of patience, of memory, of fear, of curiosity, of small, specific, bright animal joys. She is not capable, however, of imagining an object the size of a city falling from space. She does not have the conceptual apparatus for it. No animal on her planet does. The closest any of them can come is a kind of generalized large event sense, the kind of instinct that says, somewhere in the body, that the world is wrong, without knowing what is wrong. That instinct is firing. It is firing in every creature, on every continent, on every shore, on every plain, in every burrow, in every nest. The whole planet, in the moments after the flash, has gone still. We will leave her for a moment, standing over her nest, blinking into the strange whiteness of the canopy, the small wet smell of new fern in her nostrils, her 16 eggs warm beneath the mound at her feet. We will travel south. We will go to the impact site, briefly, before we come back to her. Because what is happening at the impact site, even as she stands, is what is going to come for her, and for everything else. We have to look at it. We have to know what is on its way. The impact site, in the seconds after contact, no longer exists as a place. It exists as an event, a region of nothing, a glowing wound in the side of the planet, several hundred kilometers wide and several kilometers deep, in which solid matter has been replaced by a churning soup of vapor and superheated liquid and shockwave. The sky above the impact, for thousands of meters, is no longer sky. It is fire. It is a column of incandescent material rising at speeds that defy comparison, climbing through the atmosphere, breaking through the stratosphere, breaking through the mesosphere, breaking through everything we still loosely think of as the air of our planet, and reaching out into the vacuum of space itself.
That is the part most people do not picture when they picture the impact. The asteroid does not just hit the Earth, it punches a hole through the Earth's atmosphere on the way down, and the atmosphere, when it rebounds into the hole, does not behave like ordinary air. The air closest to the impact has been vaporized along with the asteroid. The air just beyond that, superheated, expands at terrible speed. The air beyond that, pushed aside by the expansion, becomes the leading edge of a shockwave that races outward across the planet at supersonic speed. But the column itself, the rising tower of ejected material, leaves the atmosphere altogether. It throws fragments of the impact site up into space. Some of those fragments, in the days and weeks to come, will fall back into the atmosphere all over the world, raining down as glowing molten droplets. Some will leave Earth's gravity entirely. Some perhaps are still out there, somewhere in the solar system, fragments of the seabed of the Late Cretaceous Gulf of Mexico, drifting between planets. No one looking for them, no one expected to find them. No record of what they once were except for the deep memory of a planet they left behind, in the worst hour it has ever known.
The fireball climbs. The shockwave races outward.
The first ring of devastation around the impact site is already complete. Everything alive within 1,000 kilometers of the contact point is, by the standards of any modern observer, no longer alive. Some of them have not yet stopped moving, but the things that animate them have ceased. The thermal radiation alone, the heat from the fireball itself, is enough to ignite every plant, every tree, every dry leaf, every blade of horsetail, and every frond of fern within a vast circle around the point of impact. Forests that have stood for centuries become, in less than a minute, columns of flame. But this is only the beginning, because the fireball is also pumping immense amounts of material back into the upper atmosphere. Vaporized rock, vaporized iron, sulfur, carbon, glass. The vaporized rock, as it cools, will condense in the high atmosphere into a fog of tiny molten droplets. The glass, formed by the impact of the asteroid on silica-rich rocks, will fall as a fine rain over much of the planet. Some of those glass droplets are still being found today, in sediment layers all over the world. Neat little spherules trapped in stone, exactly the same age, exactly the same chemistry, the small frozen fingerprints of an afternoon nobody was meant to remember. The hot debris in the upper atmosphere will, within hours, do something that the surface of the planet has perhaps never experienced before, and certainly has not experienced since. It will re-radiate its heat downward. The hot glass and ash and droplets, suspended high in the atmosphere all over the world, will glow. They will glow at temperatures far above the temperature of an ordinary day. They will turn the sky for hours into a vast oven. Anywhere that an animal looks up at the sky, anywhere on Earth where the sky is not blocked by cloud or canopy or burrow, the sky itself will be a source of heat capable of igniting dry plant material. This is the thermal pulse. This is the second great death wave of the impact. This is what kills, in the first afternoon, the majority of the larger animals on land. We will return to it. We have to. But for now, hold the image. The sky, hot. Not warm, hot. Glowing. The kind of glow that bakes you if you stand under it. That glow is propagating across the world, even as we speak. The pterosaurs in the air, the dinosaurs in the open, the small things in the burrows, the fish in the shallow pools. All of them are about to feel a sky that has, in the strict, literal physical sense, become an enemy. The Long Mother does not know any of this. She has felt the brightness through the canopy. She has felt the strange wrongness in her bones. She has stood up off her nest. She is now standing protectively above it, her great body straddling the mounded earth, her 16 eggs still warm beneath her. The colony is in disarray. The other hadrosaurs are confused. Some are calling, low calls, the long, mournful sounds that hadrosaurs make when they want to know where everyone else is. Some are standing. Some are still lying down. A few of the younger ones are pacing, restless, sniffing the air. A juvenile, no more than 2 seasons old, is pressing himself against the flank of his mother as if he wants to crawl inside her. The forest beyond the colony is also in disarray. Birds are flying in strange patterns. Small animals are running, but not in any single direction. The river behind the colony, which has been calm all morning, is suddenly disturbed, although not yet by waves. The water is, in a way none of the animals can describe, restless. The fish are rising to the surface. Some of them are jumping out of the water entirely, falling back with small, wet sounds. The Triceratops bull, a kilometer to the east, is moving his family. He does not know where he is moving them. He only knows that they have to move. There is something wrong in the air. There is something wrong in the ground. He has not lived for 40 years without learning, on a deep instinctive level, to trust the sense that says, go. His old joints ache as he turns. His ancient body, for the first time in many years, is moving as fast as he can make it move. The juveniles, sensing their grandfather's urgency, are running to keep up. The other adults are following. The whole herd is, within seconds, in motion, pushing through the ferns, breaking small branches, leaving a trail of crushed undergrowth behind them. He does not know where to go. There is no good direction. He is, in some way, the most experienced creature in this forest, and even he is running without a destination. He is running because his body has told him to run, and because the body of a 40-year-old Triceratops, when it tells him to run, has earned the right to be obeyed. The Tyrannosaurus rex who was sleeping in the thicket has also risen. He is enormous. He is 12 meters from tip to tail. His head, which weighs as much as a small car, is held high, scanning the trees. His tiny forelimbs are tucked against his chest. His powerful hind legs are tense. He is, on this morning, perhaps 8 years old, an adult in his prime, with the kind of muscle that can chase down a Triceratops calf in 3 or 4 bounding strides. He is afraid. He has never been afraid before. He is the largest predator in his ecosystem. He has, in his life, been challenged by other Tyrannosaurus rexes, mostly males larger than him, and he has run from them, but that was not exactly fear. That was sensible withdrawal. This is something else. This is the deeper animal sense of wrongness, of an event for which no instinct exists, and the great predator, on whom every other animal in this forest casts long, fearful glances, is, in this moment, a child. He starts walking. He does not run. He does not know where to run. He walks slowly, his head still high, his eyes wide. He has nowhere to go. Now we have to talk about the shockwave. Because while the Long Mother is standing over her nest, while the Triceratops bull is moving his family, while the Tyrannosaurus rex is walking with no destination, the shockwave from the impact is racing across the planet, and it is going to reach them. The shockwave is moving at the speed of sound, more or less. The speed of sound in air near sea level is approximately 1,200 kilometers per hour, or 340 meters per second. For comparison, that is far faster than any animal on Earth has ever moved, and also far faster than the human mind reflexively understands. The distance from Chicxulub to the Long Mother's colony, in the geography of the Late Cretaceous, is approximately 2,500 kilometers. The continents have not yet reached their modern positions. North America is partly underwater. The colony is somewhere in what will, in our time, become the high plains of Montana, or perhaps Wyoming, far north of the impact site. 2,500 kilometers divided by the speed of sound equals approximately 2 hours. The shockwave will reach her in about 2 hours. The flash, the brightening of the sky, has already reached her. That was at the speed of light, instantaneous. The thermal pulse, the re-radiation of heat from the high atmosphere, is propagating now in roughly the same time frame as the flash and will be felt across her region within minutes to an hour, depending on how the debris distributes itself. The shock wave will be later.
The earthquake, the ground motion from the impact, will be earlier, because seismic waves travel through rock faster than sound through air. The seismic waves are already on their way. They are, in fact, only a few minutes from her. The first wave of debris, the rain of glass spherules, will fall over the next several hours. The tsunamis, generated by the displacement of water in the Gulf of Mexico, will not reach her at all because she is far inland. They will reach the coastal pterosaurs. They will reach the marine reptiles. They will reach the long shore of the western interior seaway, washing immense walls of water across what is now Kansas and Texas, flooding inland for hundreds of kilometers, scouring the shorelines clean. All of this is on the way. All of this, from her position, is invisible. She knows only that something is wrong. She does not know what is on its way. She does not know how to prepare. She is, in this moment, the most exposed creature on the planet, the way every creature on the planet is, in this moment, the most exposed, because none of them have any way of knowing what is coming, and even if they did, there is nothing they could do. She does not move from her nest. This is, in some way, the most important detail of her last day. She does not move. She is a mother. She has 16 eggs beneath her. She has, in her long, patient life, learned that the answer to almost every threat is to stay, to stand, to make herself large, to put her body between the threat and the nest. That is what she has always done. That is what her mother did. That is what her mother's mother did. It is the strategy that has worked, for hadrosaurs, for tens of millions of years. It will not work today, but she will run it anyway, because it is what she has, and because she does not know any other strategy. Some of the other hadrosaurs in the colony are beginning to leave. This is a thing she has never seen before. A colony does not, ordinarily, disperse during nesting. There are reasons to stay. There is safety in numbers. There is the shared protection of dozens of adults watching the perimeter. There are the established relationships, the recognized voices, the knowledge of which mother sits on which mound. To leave the colony during nesting is to give up the eggs, to abandon what has been worked for. No reasonable hadrosaur would do it. Some of them are doing it now. A young female with a clutch of only 6 eggs, fewer than usual, stands and turns away from her nest. She walks to the edge of the clearing. She stops there. She looks back. She makes a low, confused sound, somewhere between calling and crying, although neither word is right. She does not come back. She also does not leave. She stands at the edge, swaying, paralyzed by an instinct she has never had to use. A male, an older bull who has been hanging around the edges of the colony, is moving in a slow circle around the perimeter. He keeps stopping, lifting his head, listening, smelling. He has been doing this for several minutes. He has not chosen a direction. He is, in some way, trying to remember whether anything in his life has ever felt like this. Nothing has. A pair of juveniles, last year's hatchlings who are still loosely attached to the colony, are running, although it is not clear what they are running from. They run 100 paces, stop, look back, run again, stop, look back. They have made themselves more visible by running. They do not understand this. They have only the simple animal instinct that says, when wrong, move. The long mother does not move. She lowers her head slightly and presses her chin against the rim of her nest and feels the warmth of the eggs through her body. She will not leave them. Now the ground begins to move. The seismic waves from the impact have arrived. They arrive first as a low rolling tremor, the kind of tremor that small earthquakes produce, and any large animal would notice it,
but would not be especially alarmed by it. The hadrosaurs in the colony all feel it. The triceratopses, running through the forest, feel it under their feet and stumble briefly. The Tyrannosaurus rex, who has been walking, stops. Then it builds. The tremor builds in a way that ordinary earthquakes do not build. It does not crescendo and recede. It deepens. It grows. The ground is no longer trembling. The ground is shaking. The trees are swaying. The water in the river is throwing itself onto the banks. Stones are rolling. Branches are falling. The whole forest is moving. The hadrosaurs in the colony are stumbling, going down on their forelegs, getting up, going down again. The juveniles are crying. Some of the smaller ones are being knocked over by the motion of the larger ones. The young female who was standing at the edge of the clearing has fallen and is struggling to stand. The older bull who was walking the perimeter is on his side, his great body churning the leaves. The long mother braces. Her wide, stable stance, evolved over millions of years for steadying herself against floods and rough ground, holds. She does not fall. She stays over her nest. The eggs beneath her are being shaken, but they are still intact. The mound is holding. The shaking continues for nearly a minute. A minute is a long time to be shaken by the ground. In modern earthquake terms, the seismic energy from Chicxulub would have been the equivalent of an earthquake of magnitude 10 or higher, larger than any earthquake humans have ever recorded. It would have shaken the entire planet. There are sediment layers today in places as far away as New Jersey that show the disturbance of the seabed from the seismic event of that single afternoon. The whole crust of the earth rang. The shaking subsides. The forest, when it stops, is profoundly damaged. Many trees are leaning, some have fallen. The river is muddy. The colony is scattered, half the adults knocked over, several juveniles crying for parents they cannot see. There are aftershocks, small ones, lacing through the ground. The air is full of dust shaken loose from leaves. The long mother is still standing over her nest. Her 16 eggs are still warm. Some of them perhaps have cracked. She cannot tell. She does not move. She lowers her head slowly and presses her snout against the mound, smelling, listening, trying to know. The young female at the edge of the clearing has stood. She is calling. She is calling for nothing in particular. She is, simply, calling. Her voice rises and falls in the long warbling pattern that hadrosaur calls take, a sound that, when you hear it on modern reconstructions, sounds almost like a wind instrument, low and full and resonant. It carries through the forest. No one answers. The other hadrosaurs are too busy regathering themselves. The juveniles are too frightened. The colony has, in the space of a minute, lost its coherence. This is what disasters do to social animals. They do not just kill. They do not even just hurt. They unmake the structures by which the social animals have been organizing themselves. They sever the links. They scatter the formations. They make the colony into a collection of individual frightened bodies, none of whom know what the others are doing, none of whom know what to do. The colony, in this moment, is no longer a colony. It is a clearing full of dinosaurs. Now we have to step away from the long mother again. We have to go somewhere else, briefly, because the day is far from over, and the day is unfolding in many places at once, and to understand her last hours, we have to understand the rest of the planet's last hours. So we will go to the Western Interior Seaway. The Western Interior Seaway, on this morning, is one of the most beautiful waters anywhere on Earth. It is shallow, warm, full of life. It runs from the Gulf of Mexico in the south to the Arctic Ocean in the north, splitting North America into two long landmasses, with the Long Mother's continent on the east side and another smaller landmass on the west. The water is alive with ammonites, with fish, with marine reptiles, with the great mosasaurs whose teeth still litter modern museum drawers. Along the eastern shore of the seaway, hundreds of kilometers from the impact site, the morning has been ordinary. Pterosaurs have been riding the thermals, sea turtles have been crawling out of the water onto warm beaches. Mosasaurs have been hunting near the surface, their long bodies undulating just beneath the water, their great jaws snapping at any fish that broke the line. Plesiosaurs have been gliding more slowly, deeper down, scanning for prey. Sharks of many species have been doing what sharks do. Ammonites have been drifting in the warm currents, their tentacles trailing. Then the flash. The flash, on the seaway, is more visible than in the forest. The seaway is open, there is no canopy. The sky is large. When the flash comes, it lights the entire visible hemisphere of the sky like a furnace, briefly. The light is bright enough to blind any creature looking south.
The pterosaurs gliding above the water, with their eyes turned south for thermal sensing, are blinded immediately. Their inner ears, however, are still functional. They feel the pressure change. They try to glide back toward land, but their navigation is confused. Many of them descend in slow, uneven spirals and land on the water, where their wings, soaked, will not lift them again. Within minutes, hundreds of pterosaurs across the seaway are bobbing on the surface, alive but flightless, their last hours unfolding as they drift in the warm water. The mosasaurs, hunting near the surface, feel the change underwater. Sound travels differently in water. The shockwave from the impact, propagating through the water at the speed of sound in water, will reach them faster than it reaches any land creature. They will hear it as a single, overwhelming acoustic event. They will surface, briefly, in confusion. They will look around. They will not understand what they have seen. The ammonites will be the first to die in large numbers. The ammonites are delicate. Their shells are intricate. Their soft bodies depend on the careful balance of chemistry in the water around them. The vibrations from the seismic event, propagating through the water, will damage many of them within minutes. They will sink. They will stop tracking light. They will become, in the next several hours, drifting empty shells, the last great population of one of the most successful marine animal groups in the history of the Earth, beginning their final descent toward the seabed. The fish will fare slightly better, at first, but not by much. Because the seaway, in addition to all the other things that are about to happen to it, is going to receive the tsunamis. The displacement of water in the Gulf of Mexico, at the impact site, is producing waves of immense size. These waves will travel north into the seaway. They will rise as they approach shallow shores. They will reach the coasts in the form of walls of water, kilometers wide, hundreds of meters high in some places, scouring everything they touch. They will arrive at the eastern coast of the seaway, where the long mother's continent meets the water, within a few hours. They will sweep inland. The forests at the coast, the marshes, the tidal flats, the rookeries of marine reptiles, the gathering places of pterosaurs, will all be erased. The pterosaurs floating on the water will be lifted and dropped, then carried inland on the waves, then carried out again on the receding water, then finally scattered as debris. The mosasaurs will survive the immediate wave action because they are large and underwater. But the next hours, with the water turbid, the ammonites dying, the surface increasingly covered in floating debris, will be hostile to them in ways their lineage has never had to negotiate. This entire sequence, from the flash to the death of the seaway, will take perhaps a day. It is happening in parallel with everything else. It is happening alongside the long mother on her nest, the Triceratops bull pushing his family through the forest, the Tyrannosaurus rex walking nowhere in particular, the thousands of other animals on the same continent and on other continents experiencing their own versions of the same afternoon. The day is, in some sense, infinitely many simultaneous days. Every animal on the planet is having its last day, all at the same time. The story is, in that sense, untellable. We tell what we can. We focus, as we must, on a few small lives, because that is how the human mind can hold tragedy. The mind cannot hold a planet of dying things. The mind can hold a mother on a nest. The mind can hold an old bull running through trees. The mind can hold a hunter walking nowhere. From those small lives, the mind can extrapolate, dimly, the larger picture. But the larger picture itself is too large to be held. That is how all extinctions are. That is how all genocides are. That is how the long human record of catastrophe always works. A statistic is unbearable not because it is large, but because it is reducible to thousands and millions of small, unique lives, each one of which was someone, and each one of which deserved a long, careful telling that history,
in its impatience, has not given them. The dinosaurs are no different. The dinosaurs were not individually less alive than we are. They were not less attached to their nests. They were not less ferocious about their young. They were not less curious about the world. They were not less afraid in the moments when they were afraid. They were not less content in the long, warm afternoons when they were content. Each of them was, for the duration of its life, the whole of its life. The end of the dinosaurs is not the end of an abstraction. It is the end of 100 million separate stories in 100 million separate locations on the same single afternoon. We will continue to follow our few. We will follow them through the next few hours as the day moves toward what we now think of as evening. Although evening will not arrive in the ordinary way today. The light is already strange. The high atmosphere, full of debris, is reddening. The high whiteness of the post-flash sky is becoming instead a pale yellow, and the yellow is darkening toward orange, and the orange is, in a few places, beginning to glow, the way an oven glows when you open the door. The thermal pulse is arriving. We have to talk about the thermal pulse because it is, in some ways, the most important physical event of the day. More important even than the shockwave. More important even than the tsunamis. More important even than the seismic event. The thermal pulse is what does most of the killing. It is what produces the famous geological signature of the impact. It is what turns large parts of the planet, for an hour or two, into something that has no modern analog. The mechanism is straightforward in principle. The asteroid impact threw an enormous quantity of material up into the high atmosphere. Some of it was carried by the rising fireball. Some of it was kicked up by the shock wave. Most of it, in the form of vaporized rock, condensed into tiny molten droplets as it rose into the cooler upper atmosphere. Those droplets, falling back through the atmosphere as the day progressed, glowed. They glowed because they were hot. They glowed because they were, briefly, at temperatures of hundreds and thousands of degrees, and they remained hot for a long time as they fell. The total mass of this material was, by modern estimates, on the order of 10,000 cubic kilometers of rock. 10,000 cubic kilometers. That is, again, a number that the mind cannot easily hold. To put it in some kind of visual frame, 10,000 cubic kilometers of rock would be enough, if rearranged, to cover the entire United Kingdom in a layer of rock 4 times as deep as the height of Mount Everest. That is the scale of the material that was lifted off the impact site and thrown up into the atmosphere. Most of it did not leave the Earth. Most of it came back down. As it came back down, it heated the air. The air, heated by the glowing debris, began to radiate that heat downward toward the ground. The radiation was infrared, the same kind of radiation a heat lamp emits. It was, however, vastly more intense than any heat lamp. Any patch of ground anywhere on the planet that had a clear view of the sky was, during the thermal pulse, being bathed in radiation strong enough to ignite vegetation. Dry leaves caught fire. Pine needles caught fire. Dead branches caught fire. Whole forests in many places on the planet began to burn at the same time, ignited not by lightning, not by an open flame, but by the sky. The sky, on the day the dinosaurs died, was hot. That is the central physical fact of the day. The sky, for an hour or two, was hot enough to set the world on fire. This is what comes for the Long Mother. Not the impact itself, not directly. She is too far north for the direct fireball. She is too far inland for the tsunamis. The shockwave will reach her later in the afternoon and will be terrifying, but it will not kill her. The earthquakes have already passed. What comes for her is the sky. What comes for her is the slow brightening of the atmosphere, the deepening of the strange yellow into orange, the orange into red, the red into a kind of dull furnace glow that has no name. What comes for her is the temperature of the air around her, rising slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, then less imperceptibly, then unmistakably. What comes for her is the moment when the leaves of the trees above her colony begin to brown at the edges, to curl, to smoke, and then, in a dozen places at once, to catch fire. This will happen in the next hour. She does not know it. She is standing over her nest. The eggs are warm. She is, more than anything, simply tired. She is a mother who has been nesting for a long time. Her body is stiff. Her great muscles are sore. She is hungry, although not painfully so. She would like, at some point soon, to walk a few paces, to drink at the river, to stretch. She does not. She stays. Across the continent, other animals are making other choices. The Triceratops bull has led his family through the forest. They have crossed a stream. They have climbed a low ridge. They have come down the other side into a wide grassy clearing where, on ordinary days, the family has grazed. The grasses of the Late Cretaceous are not yet the long, sweeping grasses of modern prairies. They are early grasses, sparse, growing among other ground plants. The clearing is open. The sky is large above it. The sky is wrong. The bull stops at the edge of the clearing. He looks up. The sky is, in the wide angle visible from this clearing, the strangest thing he has ever seen. There are no clouds. There is no proper blue. There is only a deepening orange, banded with darker streaks where the debris is thicker, lit from within by an even brighter source that he cannot identify. The sun is somewhere up there, but he cannot find it. There is no shadow on the ground. There is, instead, a kind of diffuse glow. The kind of glow that means a fire is burning somewhere out of sight. He does not enter the clearing. He turns. He pushes his family back toward the forest. The juveniles are tired. They complain in their small, low, juvenile voices. He ignores them. He pushes them under the cover of the trees. The trees, in their own way, are wrong, too. The leaves at the top of the canopy are beginning to look strange. The bull, who is not a creature given to noticing the tops of trees, notices this in some unconscious way, because the light coming through them is no longer the dappled green light of an ordinary midday. It is, instead, a kind of burnt yellow. The leaves themselves, where he can see them clearly, are not the bright fresh green they were this morning. They are, in some patches, already curled. In other patches they are dropping. There is no wind to drop them. He stops in the deep cover of the trees. He stands. He listens. The other adults gather close to him. The juveniles, recognizing the urgency, fall silent. They are, in their small frightened way, looking up at the canopy too. There is a sound now. It is not a familiar sound. It is not the sound of an approaching predator. It is not the sound of weather. It is, instead, the sound of distant burning. A vast, slow, soft crackle, far away, coming from many directions at once. The sound of a planet whose dry vegetation has begun to ignite. The bull does not know what the sound is. He stands very still. The world around him is on fire, although he cannot yet see the flames. The Tyrannosaurus Rex has walked in his slow, uncertain way to the edge of his territory. He has stopped at the bank of the river that he uses to mark his eastern edge. He has stood there for some time. He has looked at the water. He has looked at the sky. He has been confused. He is not used to being confused. He has in his hierarchy of feelings mostly two: hunger and the absence of hunger. When he is hungry, he hunts. When he is not hungry, he rests. He is intelligent for a non-avian dinosaur, but his intelligence is the intelligence of a successful ambush predator. And ambush predators do not generally need much philosophy. He has lived 8 years on this principle, and it has worked. Today, he is something else. He is afraid. He does not have a name for what he is feeling. He has, in his fear, no plan. He has, in his fear, no instinct that helps him. He stands at the riverbank. He turns. He walks a few paces. He stops. He turns again. He walks back to the riverbank. He stares into the water. The water is moving, restlessly, as if it is also afraid. The pterosaurs, who would ordinarily be visible high above his territory at this hour, are not there. The sound of small life in the underbrush has stopped. The light in the forest has changed. He sits, slowly, lowering his great body onto his haunches at the edge of the water. He has not sat down like this in a long time. He is a creature designed to be on his feet. But there is, in this moment, no good direction to be on his feet in, and so he sits. The water reflects the sky. The sky, in the water, is orange. He stares at the orange reflection of the sky for a long time, his small, clever eyes blinking slowly, his great head tilted, trying to understand. He does not understand. He will never understand. He is going to die in this position, more or less, within a few hours, when the heat of the thermal pulse becomes unsurvivable for any large animal in the open. He will not run. He will not roar. He will not fight. He will, in some way, simply lower his head and stop. The greatest predator of the late Cretaceous, on his last afternoon, will die confused. This is one of the deepest small horrors of the impact. It killed without context. The animals it killed did not have a story for what was happening to them. They did not have a god to blame, or an enemy to curse, or a fate to accept. They had only the wrongness, growing, and the absence of any frame for the wrongness, and finally the moment when the wrongness became too much for their bodies. We have, in our human time, developed elaborate stories about death. We have prayers, we have rituals, we have the consoling fiction that the universe, at some level, owes us an explanation. The dinosaurs did not have any of this. Whatever it is that an animal feels in the last hours of its life, when its world is being unmade and it does not know why, the dinosaurs felt it without any framework that might have softened the blow. In some ways, that is the harder death, the death without story. Time passes in the forest. It is afternoon. The sun, if you could see it through the haze, would be moving toward the western horizon. The strange light has not faded. If anything, it has thickened. The orange glow above the canopy is now visible from beneath the trees, a kind of dull bronze sheen on every leaf, a warmth on the upturned face of any animal who looks up. The leaves are dropping in many places. They are not falling because of wind. They are falling because they are dying. The high heat of the thermal pulse has begun to scorch the upper canopy. Leaves that were vibrant this morning are, by the early afternoon, brown. They are letting go of their stems. They are drifting downward, sometimes singly, sometimes in small clusters, settling onto the forest floor in patches of dry, brittle vegetable matter. The forest floor itself is becoming a place where fire could spread. In some areas, where the canopy is thinner and the thermal pulse has reached the ground directly, fires have already started. Small ones at first. A patch of dry fern, smoldering. A clump of moss, glowing. A fallen branch catching at one end. The flames are not yet large. They are tentative. They are, however, multiplying. There is no rain. There is no help. There is no one to put them out. The fires will, in the next hours, find each other. They will join. They will become, in many parts of the continent, the great wildfires that mark the boundary layer of the impact in the geological record. The boundary layer is where, in modern rocks, you can see the dust and the iridium and the glass spherules and the carbon. The carbon is the key. The carbon is from burned wood. The carbon is, in some real sense, the ashes of the late Cretaceous forests, preserved in stone for 66 million years, waiting for someone to dig down to them and ask what happened. The carbon layer is, in many places on Earth, several centimeters thick. Several centimeters of pure carbon. That is how much wood, how many leaves, how many fronds, how many roots burned on that single afternoon and the few that followed. The whole world burned. Not metaphorically, literally. Some estimates suggest that perhaps half of all standing vegetation on the planet ignited within the first day or two after the impact, although newer research has suggested that the fires may have been more concentrated in certain regions rather than universal. Either way, the burning was vast, and the carbon footprint of it is in the rocks under every continent, the last quiet residue of what was once a green and humming world. The long mother smells the smoke. She smells it before she sees it. Her nostrils, which have been processing the warm, familiar smells of her colony all morning, suddenly catch something else. A sharp, burnt smell. A wood smell. A fern smell, but wrong. She lifts her head, slowly. She turns it from side to side, testing the air. The smell is coming from many directions. This is the first thing that tells her, in some animal way, that this is not a local fire. A local fire smells like one direction. A planetary fire smells like the air itself. The air, around her, smells like burning, and the burning is not coming from any single source she can identify. The colony around her has begun to fragment. Two of the other mothers have finally left their nests. They have stood. They have walked. They have not gone far, only to the edge of the clearing, but they have left their eggs. The eggs are, after all, only eggs. The mothers themselves are still capable of producing more eggs if they survive. The mothers themselves are the more valuable assets by any biological accounting, and some part of them has registered this and made the calculation. The long mother does not make this calculation. She is older. She has nested many times. She does not, in her old patient body, feel certain that another season will come. She feels certain only of these eggs, these 16, in this nest, on this afternoon. She will not leave them. The young male who was sleeping in the sun has woken. He is standing. He is looking around. He is making the kind of small distress calls that the colony's juveniles sometimes make. He has no eggs. He has no nest. He has only himself. He is, in some way, the most lost creature in the clearing because he has nothing to keep him here. He turns. He walks toward the river. He stops. He turns the other way. He walks toward the forest. He stops. He has no destination. The long mother watches him with a kind of distant sympathy. She knows what he is feeling. She has felt it once, very long ago, on the morning she lost her first clutch to a predator. She remembers walking the same kind of meaningless circles, looking for something to do, finding nothing. She lowers her head and looks at her nest. She will not lose this clutch. She will, in her stubborn old way, stay. In the high canopy of the trees above her, the first leaves catch fire. It is barely noticeable at first. A single fern frond, high up, where the heat from the sky has been concentrated by a gap in the canopy, has begun to smolder. The smoke rises very thin, and the frond glows briefly at its edges, and then it catches, and a small bright orange shape blooms among the green. She does not see it. She is looking at her eggs. The flame spreads slowly to the neighboring fronds. The other plants in that part of the canopy begin to smolder as well, ignited by radiative heat from the now burning fern. Within a few minutes, an entire small section of the upper canopy is on fire. The fire is not yet large. It is, however, no longer a single point. It is, instead, a small bright patch of yellow and orange, 15 meters above the ground, embedded in the green of the surrounding canopy. The other hadrosaurs see it before she does. There is a sudden change in the calls around the clearing. Several of the adults make a particular sound that, in the small vocabulary of hadrosaur communication, means above. It is not a sound used often. It is a sound used when a particular kind of large flying predator, the kind that no longer exists in this region, used to be a danger. The sound is older than the colony. The sound is, in some way, an inheritance. The mothers who hear it look up. They see the small patch of fire in the canopy. They do not, of course, understand what fire is in any deep sense. They are not creatures who have lit campfires or cooked their food. They are not creatures whose ancestors have ever encountered fire as anything other than the occasional rare phenomenon of a lightning-struck tree. But they understand danger. They understand bright. They understand hot. They understand wrong. The mothers who have not yet left their nests, including the long mother, finally look up. The long mother sees the fire. She does not move at first. She is, in her body, working out a calculation she has never had to work out before. The danger above her is not a danger she can fight. She cannot stand over the fire the way she can stand over a predator. She cannot bluff it. She cannot intimidate it. The fire is, in a sense she does not have the words for, indifferent. It is also, in a sense she does not have the words for, coming.
She begins very slowly to push the loose vegetation around her nest into a tighter pile. She is trying to protect the eggs. It is a futile gesture in any practical sense. The fire above her, when it spreads, will not be turned by leaves. The heat from the sky, when it intensifies, will not be deflected by ferns. But she does not know this. She is doing what a hadrosaur mother does when her nest is threatened. She is shielding. The pile of leaves around her eggs grows slightly. The fire above her grows much more. It has, in the few minutes she has been working, doubled in size. It is now a patch of perhaps 2 meters across, eating its way through the dry upper canopy. Burning fragments are beginning to drift downward. They are still small. They are still mostly extinguished by the time they reach the forest floor. But they are there, and they are everywhere, and they are increasing. She steps back slightly from her work. She looks at her nest. She looks at the canopy. For the first time in her long, quiet life, she has a thought of a kind. It is not the kind of thought a human would have. It is not articulated. It is not framed in language. But it is the closest thing a hadrosaur mind can have to a thought. And what it says, in some pre-verbal animal grammar, is roughly this: I cannot fix this. I cannot do anything about this. I do not know what to do. It is the worst thought she has ever had. She sits down, slowly, beside her nest. It is unusual for a hadrosaur to sit. They are built for standing. They are built for walking. They are built for grazing low and looking far. To sit is a small surrender. The other mothers in the colony, watching her, recognize it. She does not move from beside the nest. She does not leave. She has, in her body, made a decision. She has decided not to abandon her eggs. She has decided that, whatever comes, she will be here when it comes. She does not know what is coming. She knows only that she will not leave the nest first. This is not, in any practical sense, going to save the eggs, but it is what she has chosen. She is, in this moment, one of countless hadrosaur mothers across the continent making the same choice. Some have already died doing it in regions closer to the impact. Some have not yet had to make it in regions farther away. But across the great long stretch of forests and clearings and river valleys where her species lives, mothers are sitting beside their nests, refusing to leave, putting their bodies in positions that will not save the eggs, but will not abandon them either. It is the oldest gesture of her species. It is, in some way, the oldest gesture of any species that nests at all. It is, in the next several hours, going to be useless. It is also, in some other way, sacred. We are going to step away from the colony again, briefly, because we need to look at what is happening at the global scale. We have followed individual animals through their experience of the day. We need now to widen the view. We need to see what the day is doing to the planet. So picture the Earth. Picture it from above. Picture it from very high above, from the position the asteroid was in only a few hours ago. Picture it as a small blue and green and white sphere, with 2.5 continents, with 2 great oceans, with the long, shallow inland seaway, with the great forests of the temperate latitudes and the tropical forests of the equatorial latitudes, and the polar forests that, at this time, still grow at the polar latitudes because there is not yet polar ice. Picture it as the late Cretaceous Earth. Now picture a wound on its southern hemisphere, where the Yucatan is now, and where, on this afternoon, an unspeakable bright crater is still glowing. Picture the column of the impact, dispersing into the high atmosphere, spreading out across the planet on the high-altitude winds. Picture the dust and the glass and the sulfur compounds and the soot beginning to form a thin haze in the upper layers of the atmosphere. A haze that will, within days, become a dense, planet-wide curtain. Picture the fires. The fires are not everywhere yet. They are concentrated in the regions where the thermal pulse has been strongest and where the vegetation is driest. But there are many fires. There are thousands of them. There are tens of thousands. They are visible from space, if there were anyone in space to see them. Looking down at North America at this hour, you would see, beneath the orange haze of the upper atmosphere,
a dense scattering of bright yellow points where the forests have ignited. You would see, beneath the brown haze of the lower atmosphere, vast columns of smoke rising and joining the haze, thickening it. You would see, in the seas, the wave action. The tsunamis, which have already devastated the coastlines of what is now North America and South America and the Caribbean and parts of Africa, are continuing to ripple outward. The Pacific Basin, which is large and deep, is absorbing the wave energy more efficiently than the smaller seas, but even there, the disturbance is visible. Long, broad swells are moving across the open ocean. Coastal animals, in places thousands of kilometers from the impact, are experiencing flooding that has no antecedent in their lives. You would see, on the lands, the movement of animals. Many of them are running. Many of them are dying. Many of them are simply stopping, the way the Tyrannosaurus stopped, sitting in their territories, watching their world come apart. You would see, in the high atmosphere, the spreading darkness. The darkness is the most important thing in the long term. It is not yet dark, of course. The atmosphere is, right now, glowing. The thermal pulse is still ongoing. The fires are still spreading. The dust and the soot and the sulfur, however, are accumulating in the upper atmosphere. Within a few days, perhaps within a week, the upper atmosphere will be opaque. The sun, when it tries to shine through it, will be dimmed. The earth, beneath the curtain, will become cold. This is what is called the impact winter. This is, in many ways, what does the long extinction. The thermal pulse kills, within hours, most of the large animals exposed to the sky. The fires kill more, within days. The wave action kills coastal animals. The earthquake kills some. The collapse of the food chain kills others over weeks and months. But the long, deep cold, the impact winter, is what kills the rest. The impact winter will last for years, not weeks, not months, years. The dust will block the sunlight. The plants will die because plants cannot live without sunlight. The animals that ate plants will die because there are no plants to eat. The animals that ate plants will die because there are no animals that ate plants to eat. The whole food web will collapse, layer by layer, over the slow, cold years. By the time the dust clears, by the time the sunlight returns, by the time the spring of the impact winter finally arrives, the world will be empty in ways that no world on Earth has ever been empty. But that is for later. For now, the day is still going on. For now, the long mother is still beside her nest. For now, the fires are still spreading. For now, the sky is still hot. Let us return to her. She has not moved. The fire in the canopy above her colony has, in the time we have been away, doubled again. It is now a patch of perhaps 4 meters across. It is shedding burning debris onto the forest floor. Small fires have started on the leaf litter around the colony, in 3 places that she can see and probably more that she cannot. The other mothers are leaving. This is the great mass abandonment, the moment when the colony, as a collective decision-making organism, finally agrees that the nests cannot be held. One after another, the mothers are standing, looking briefly at their eggs, and then walking away. Some are walking quickly. Some are walking slowly, with the kind of dragging step that indicates internal resistance. None of them are running. They are not, in this moment, prey. They are something stranger. They are creatures making the hardest choice of their lives in a slow, deliberate way. The clearing is emptying. The eggs in the abandoned nests are still warm. They are still alive inside their shells. They are still, for a few more minutes, the small, folded forms of unhatched hadrosaurs. The long mother watches the others go. She does not follow. She is, by the end of the next few minutes, the only adult left in the clearing. The clearing is large. She is, suddenly, alone in it. She does not understand alone. She has not been alone in any meaningful way in years. She has lived inside the colony, with the colony, as part of the colony. The other mothers have always been around her. The juveniles have always been moving at the edges. The males have always been patrolling. The colony has been the texture of her existence, the constant background hum of her life. She has forgotten, perhaps, how to be alone. She is reminded now. She lowers her head. She presses her chin against the rim of the nest. The eggs, beneath the covering of leaves, are still warm. She can feel their warmth. She can almost feel, she thinks, the slow, patient pressing of the unhatched young against their shells. This may not be true. They may already be dead. The shaking earlier, the shock, the heat, may have done damage that she cannot see. But she cannot tell from outside, and she has decided to act as if they are still alive. She makes a small sound. It is a sound that hadrosaur mothers make to their unhatched young. It is, in some way, a song. Not a song in any technical sense, but a long, low warble, the kind of sound that, when she was a juvenile herself, her own mother used to make over her. It is the sound of a parent reassuring a child that the world is still here, that the parent is still here, that the slow, patient process of becoming a small, new, alive thing is still allowed to continue. She has not made this sound in months. She makes it now. The eggs, of course, do not answer, but she keeps making it. She makes it for a long time. The fire in the canopy continues to grow. The burning fragments continue to fall around her. One of them, smoldering, lands on the edge of her flank. She brushes it away with her tail, without thinking, the way an animal brushes away a fly. The skin where it touched is reddened, but she does not notice. She is humming, in her hadrosaur way, to her eggs. This is, in some sense, the most heartbreaking moment of the day. It is not the moment of her death. Her death will come later, after the heat becomes unbearable, after the smoke fills her lungs, after the moment when her body simply gives up. The most heartbreaking moment is this one. A mother, alone in a clearing, with the world burning around her, singing softly to a clutch of eggs that may already be dead, with no intention of leaving, because she has, in her long quiet life, never abandoned anything she has loved. We do not know, of course, that this is what happened. We are inventing her. We are inventing the song. We are inventing Be Alone, the loud calls of the leaving colony, the small details of the burning fragments. But we are inventing her from real evidence. We know from fossil sites in Montana and elsewhere that hadrosaur mothers built nests, defended them, and were sometimes found dead beside them. We know from the structure of their inner ears and throats that they made sounds. We know from analysis of similar living animals that those sounds included communication with young. We know from the geological evidence that fires swept through the Late Cretaceous forests in the hours and days after the impact. We know that the boundary layer is full of carbonized plant material, of glass, of dust, of the chemical signatures of an event that left no part of the planet untouched. We are not making up the fact that mothers died beside their nests. We are only giving one of them a name we have not even said, a song we cannot hear, and the small dignity of being looked at 66 million years later by minds that came along eventually to ask what had happened. That, in some way, is the only thing we can give her now. Let us walk away from the colony for a while. She will still be there when we come back. There are other things to see on this long, terrible afternoon. There are other lives ending in other ways. There is, perhaps, the last call of the pterosaurs to consider. The pterosaurs, by mid-afternoon, are largely dead. The pterosaurs in the air at the moment of the flash were blinded and then disoriented, and many fell. The pterosaurs on the ground in their rookeries are now being killed by the thermal pulse because their bodies are too lightly built to retain much internal heat regulation, and their wings, leathery and exposed, are vulnerable to even moderate increases in air temperature. They are dying in the open, in their long, quiet rookeries on the cliffs of the seaway, in their nesting sites in the tall trees of the river deltas, in the high inland places where they used to ride the thermals. Some of them die in flight, falling out of the sky. Some of them die on the ground, their long necks curled beneath their bodies. Some of them died during the terrible later hours, simply unable to find shelter from a sky that has become hostile in every direction. It is the end of the pterosaurs. It is the end of 150 million years of flying reptiles. The pterosaurs do not survive the impact. None of their lineages make it through. They are, when the day is over, and the next day, and the next, gone. The next time the sky will have flying creatures larger than a sparrow on it will be more than 30 million years later, when the descendants of certain small bird lineages will radiate into the open skies and begin to occupy the niches that the pterosaurs vacated. The pterosaurs are, in our human time, beloved. They are on the covers of children's books. They are in dioramas and natural history museums. They are mounted in vast displays with their leathery wings spread wide, their long beaks pointing skyward, their alien shapes captured in the frozen stillness of reconstructed skeletons. In their last hours, however, no one is admiring them. They are simply falling. Imagine one of them. A young female Quetzalcoatlus with a wingspan of perhaps 8 or 9 meters. She is one of the smaller members of her species, although she would still tower over any human being who might somehow have seen her. She has been gliding all morning along the warm thermals rising from the cliffs of the eastern shore of the seaway. She has eaten earlier, a small marine reptile she snatched from the surface of the water. She is full. She has been simply riding the air, watching the world below, occasionally adjusting her trajectory with the small, slow shifts of her wing membranes. When the flash comes, she is mid-thermal. She does not see the flash directly because she is facing east, not south. But she feels the heat. She feels the pressure. She feels, in her astonishingly sensitive air sense, a kind of slap on the entire surface of her body as the shock wave reaches her from below. She tumbles briefly in the disturbed air. She recovers. She tries to glide downward. The air below her is no longer stable. The thermal she was riding has been disrupted by the shock wave. She fights to keep her wings level. She begins to descend more steeply than she intended. The cliffs below her are coming up faster than she expected. She tries to flare for landing. She is too late. She strikes the cliff face, hard, breaking one of her long, thin wing fingers on the rock. She falls the last 20 meters down to the rocky shore below, landing on her side, with her broken wing folded under her. She does not die immediately. She lies there for some hours, breathing slowly, with her good wing twitching from time to time, with her great long neck stretched along the shore, with her eyes open and watching the strange orange sky above her. She is in pain. She is also, in some way, calm. She does not know what has happened to her. She does not know that she will not fly again. She knows only that she is here, on this shore, and that the air, when she breathes it, is full of smoke, and that the sky, when she looks at it, is wrong. Eventually, she stops breathing. She lies there, on the shore, until the tsunamis arrive an hour later and carry her body inland, where she will, over the next 66 million years, become part of the chemistry of the rocks that paleontologists will, one day, study very carefully, without ever knowing exactly which Quetzalcoatlus they have found. This is one death. There are many. It is worth saying here that the impact does not kill every living thing all at once. The impact is not a single event with a single death toll. It is a long sequence of events, unfolding over hours, days, weeks, months, years. The story of the extinction is not the story of the impact. The story of the extinction is the story of the slow disintegration of the world after the impact, layer by layer, system by system, species by species. Some animals die in the first minute. Some die in the first hour. Some die in the first day. Many die in the first weeks, from starvation, from cold, from injury, from the failure of their food supplies, from the disruption of their habitats. A large number die in the first year, as the impact winter deepens. A very large number die in the second year, and the third, as the food chain collapses. By the time the impact winter ends, by the time the dust finally settles out of the high atmosphere, by the time the sun returns in something like its previous brightness, most of the species that existed on the morning of the impact are gone. Not just the dinosaurs, most species, period. Estimates vary, but somewhere around 75% of all species on Earth, including most of the marine species, all of the non-avian dinosaurs, all of the pterosaurs, the ammonites, many of the mammals, most of the marine reptiles, and a huge proportion of the plants. This is what is called the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event, or sometimes the KPG boundary. It is the fifth great mass extinction in Earth's history. It is the most famous one because it killed the dinosaurs, but it is not the largest one. The largest was earlier, at the end of the Permian period, 250 million years ago, when something like 95% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species died. That was even worse. It also took longer. The end Permian extinction unfolded over thousands or even millions of years, driven by volcanic activity and climate change and ocean chemistry. The end Cretaceous extinction was different. The end Cretaceous extinction was concentrated, in many ways, into a single afternoon. Let us go halfway around the world, briefly, before we come back to the burning forests of the continent we have been walking on. Let us go to what will, in some far time, be called Mongolia. In the late Cretaceous, Mongolia is not a desert. It is a warm, semi-arid landscape of red sand dunes, scattered freshwater lakes, low scrubby vegetation, and surprising abundance. The fossil record of this region, in our own time, is one of the most extraordinary anywhere on Earth, because the dunes have preserved entire ecosystems with the kind of small, specific detail that, in most other places, has been lost. Pairs of fighting dinosaurs, locked together in death. Mothers brooding nests with their wings spread across their eggs, the wing bones still in place after 80 million years. Whole families of small predators sleeping together in their dens. On the morning of the impact, in a particular sandy valley in this region, a small group of velociraptors is hunting. The velociraptor is not the creature of popular movies. The velociraptor is small, about the size of a large turkey, fully feathered, intelligent, and quick. The actual hunting raptors of the popular imagination, the larger ones, are different species, mostly Deinonychus from North America, although the name velociraptor stuck in the public mind. The real velociraptor of Mongolia is, however, no less formidable in its own scale. It is a fierce, small, clever animal, capable of working in small groups, capable of taking prey larger than itself, capable of strategies and recognitions that, in any modern bird, we would call intelligent. There are 3 of them in this hunting party. A female, slightly larger than the others, with bright copper-colored feathers along her back and a dark stripe across her eyes. A male, slightly smaller, with paler feathers and a long, thin tail. A juvenile, half-grown, with patchier feathering and the slightly oversized legs of an adolescent. They have been tracking a protoceratops, a small horned dinosaur about the size of a sheep, for most of the morning. The protoceratops is grazing at the edge of a thicket of fern-like plants. It is alone, which is unusual. It is also slightly old, which makes it slower than it would have been in its prime. The velociraptors have been waiting for the right moment to move. They are still waiting when the flash arrives. The flash, at this distance from the impact, is bright but not blinding. It lights the sky for a fraction of a second. The velociraptors all turn their heads toward the south. They are creatures of immense visual acuity. They notice the light. They notice the strange momentary brightening of the air. They do not understand what it is. The protoceratops does not seem to notice. It continues grazing. The velociraptors wait. A few minutes pass. The sky in the south has a thin pale glow that was not there before. The air around the hunting party feels different. There is no wind, exactly, but there is a faint pressure, the kind of pressure that, in any other context, might have preceded a distant storm. The female velociraptor takes a step forward. She has decided that something is wrong, but she has also decided that, since she does not know what is wrong, she might as well finish what she has started. She signals to the male with a small, precise movement of her head. The male moves to the other side of the thicket. The juvenile, on instinct, takes the third position, blocking the protoceratops's most likely escape route. The hunt begins. It is, in some sense, the last hunt of the late Cretaceous, although there are countless others happening simultaneously, all over the world, in their own small, specific ways. The female springs forward. The protoceratops looks up. The protoceratops, in its small, frightened way, tries to run, and immediately finds itself face to face with the male, who has come around the other side. It tries to turn and is blocked by the juvenile. It tries to back into the thicket, but the female is already on its flank, her great curved sickle claw on her hind foot poised for the strike. The strike is fast. The Protoceratops within a few seconds is down. The velociraptors begin to feed. They feed efficiently. They feed in a particular order, with the female taking the choicest parts first. The juvenile, watching, learns. The male, working at another part of the body, eats more quickly, knowing his share is smaller. The hunting party, in the small, specific, cooperative way that small predators have always organized themselves, is at work. They do not know that this is their last meal. They do not know that the air around them is full of something that has never been in the air before. They do not know that the high atmosphere far above them is gathering the debris that will, within hours, begin its slow infrared rain across the planet. They do not know that the small, specific, cooperative way they have been living is, in this hour, in this minute, ending. They simply eat. By the next morning, all three of them will be dead. The Mongolian region, while spared the worst of the immediate thermal pulse, will receive enough of the upper atmosphere heat to ignite the dry scrub vegetation across the area. The hunting party, returning to their den that evening, will find their den area smoking and their stored food spoiled and the air increasingly difficult to breathe. They will not understand. They will try in their small, clever way to find a new place. There will not be one. The female, who has lived 4 years and raised one previous clutch of young, will die first, in the early hours of the next morning, from inhaling too much smoke in a dry riverbed where she had taken shelter. The male will die later that day in similar circumstances in a different riverbed several kilometers away. The juvenile, who is the youngest and the smallest and the least experienced, will last the longest. He will survive, somehow, for 3 more weeks, eating small reptiles and the occasional dead body of something larger, until the cold finally settles in and his lightly feathered body, designed for the warm Cretaceous climate of his birth, cannot maintain itself against the falling temperatures. He will lie down, eventually, beneath an overhang of red sandstone. He will, in his small, frightened way, curl himself into the position that small feathered theropods curl into when they sleep. His tail will wrap around his body. His head will tuck under one wing. His eyes will close. He will become, over the next 80 million years, one of the most beautiful fossils ever found in the Mongolian beds. When he is discovered, his posture will be unmistakable. He will look like a sleeping bird. He will look like a creature who simply lay down and did not get up. The paleontologists who find him will recognize immediately what he was doing. They will photograph him carefully. They will publish papers about him. They will, in their slow scientific way, give him a name. He will not know any of this. He will only have, in his last few hours, the small, private, specific reality of being too cold, too tired, too hungry, too confused, with no parents to help him and no flock to return to and no warm thicket to hide in. He will have what every small creature has had at the end of its life, since the first small creature came into being. He will have the simple, irreducible knowledge that it is time to lie down. And he will lie down. There are many small, private, specific lives like this one across the planet on the day of the impact, and in the days and weeks that follow. We cannot tell all of them. We cannot even tell 1,000th of them. But each of them was a small, private, specific reality, with its own particular memories, its own particular fears, its own particular last moments. The hunting party in Mongolia, the pterosaur on the cliff shore, the Tyrannosaurus sitting beside the river, the Triceratops bull pushing his family through the trees, the long mother on her nest. Each of them, one of countless. Each of them, in their own small, specific corner of the planet, doing the same thing in different bodies, in different climates, in different vegetations, in different colors of sand and different patterns of stone. Each of them, in some small way, the same creature, the same drama, the same final hours. That is what an extinction event is when you look at it closely. It is not a single death. It is millions of small, specific deaths. It is the simultaneous unmaking of millions of small, specific lives. It is the same loss, multiplied beyond what any single mind can hold, repeated in every valley and every river bend and every grove of trees and every patch of warm earth where, on this morning, something had been alive. Let us return now to our own continent. Let us return to the Long Mother, who is still beside her burning nest. But before we do, one more place, one more brief stop before we settle back into the slow telling of her last hours. Let us go to the high northern latitudes, to a forest in what will, in our time, become Alaska. The high northern latitudes, in the late Cretaceous, are not yet polar in the modern sense. They are temperate. There are forests there. There are dinosaurs there, including some species that have specifically adapted to the long winter nights and the cool summers. There are hadrosaurs, theropods, even small ankylosaurs. There is a particular species of pachyrhinosaur, a horned dinosaur, that lives in herds along the river valleys of what we will, much later, name the Yukon. The thermal pulse reaches the high latitudes more weakly. The geometry of the impact and the angle of the sun and the distribution of debris in the upper atmosphere all conspire to make the thermal pulse less severe at the poles than at the tropics. The Alaskan forests do not all burn on the first afternoon. Some of them survive the immediate event. But the impact winter is, if anything, worse at the high latitudes. The animals there are already adapted to long, dark seasons. They are already, in some sense, tougher than their tropical cousins. They can handle cold. They can handle darkness. They cannot handle years of cold and darkness with no food. A herd of pachyrhinosaurs in a particular river valley in what will, 66 million years from now, be called the North Slope, experiences the morning of the impact only as a slightly strange day. The flash, at their latitude, is not as bright. The thermal pulse is not as intense. There is no fire in their canopy. The shock wave, when it arrives, is somewhat dampened by the distance and the atmospheric conditions. They feel the earthquake more than anything else, but the earthquakes are small at their latitude because the seismic waves have dispersed somewhat in their long travel. They go on with their day. They graze on the late spring vegetation along the river. The herd's matriarch, an old female with a particularly heavy crest of bone above her snout, leads them to a familiar feeding ground. The juveniles play, mock charging each other, practicing the kind of head-on impact that their species uses in adult disputes. The matriarch watches them, half attentive, the way old females in social herds always watch their young. She does not know that the world has ended. She does not know it in the next week either, when the food supply begins to seem oddly thin, or in the next month, when the sky has not lightened, or in the next several months, when the cold of the impact winter has begun to settle in, deeper than any winter she has ever known, although she has lived through many. She and her herd will starve, slowly, over the next year or two, in a forest where the trees have died because the sunlight has gone, where the small mammals they cannot reach have crawled underground, where the streams have begun to ice over for longer and longer periods each season. They will not be killed by the impact. They will be killed by the long emptiness that the impact created. This is the unbearable thing about the impact winter. It is patient. The impact kills quickly. The impact winter takes its time. The impact winter walks slowly through the world, finding every animal that survived the immediate event and starving it. It finds every plant that survived the immediate event and shading it. It finds every ecosystem that survived the immediate event and dismantling it. Year by year, season by season, until there is nothing left to dismantle. We need to return to the Long Mother now. She is, by this point, in the early evening of her last day, although evening has lost its meaning. The sky above the colony is not darkening in the usual way. It is, instead, a deep, dull red, the color of the bottom of a fireplace, with brighter streaks where the burning canopy is most intense. The air around her is hot, not the hot of a warm afternoon, the hot of an oven. She is breathing more heavily. She is not moved from beside her nest. She is, in some way, no longer thinking. She is past thinking. She is in the simple animal state of presence, of being beside her eggs, of being in her place. Her great body is slick with sweat. Her tongue is dry. Her nostrils are filled with smoke and her own breath. The fire in the canopy has spread. It is now an open canopy fire, sweeping through the upper layers of the trees in great waves of orange and yellow. The flames are not directly above her, yet, but they are moving across the clearing, advancing tree by tree, and they will be over her within the next hour. The eggs, in the nest, are no longer warm in the gentle living way. They are hot. They have been heated by the thermal pulse and by the burning debris around them. The interior temperature of the eggs has risen past the survivable threshold. The young inside have, over the last hour, gone still. She does not know this. She is still there. She is still beside them. She is still, in her old patient way, doing the only thing she knows how to do. A burning fragment falls onto the edge of the nest. It catches on the loose leaves that she has spent the afternoon arranging. The leaves smolder, then catch, and a small fire begins on the edge of her own nest. She turns. She brushes the fire away with her snout, ineffectually. Some of the burning material spreads. She brushes again. Her snout is scorched. She does not stop. She brushes again and again, putting her own face into the small flame at the edge of her nest, the way she would put her face into a predator's claws if she had to. The fire spreads to another part of the nest. She turns to that side. She brushes. The fire spreads to a third part. She turns. She brushes. She is, in this moment, fighting fire with her snout. She is, in this moment, the most futile mother on earth. She is, in this moment, doing exactly what every parent on every planet has always done in the face of a force too large to fight. She is trying. The nest is burning, slowly. The eggs inside, although they have already stopped developing, are hot enough now that their shells are cracking from the heat. Small wet steam is escaping from the cracks. The young inside, who are by this point dead in any meaningful sense, are being slowly cooked in their shells. She does not understand. She continues to brush. The fire grows. She continues to brush. The fire grows. Eventually, her own body fails. It is not the fire that kills her directly. It is the heat. It is the smoke. It is the slow inflammation of her airways, the swelling of her throat, the gradual failure of her lungs to oxygenate her blood. She begins to feel weak. Her great legs, which have held her up all afternoon, begin to tremble. Her vision narrows. She sits, slowly, beside the burning nest. She lays her head down on the edge of the nest. The fire is by now eating into the lower edges of the mound. It is licking at the leaves she had so carefully arranged. It is climbing toward the eggs themselves. She lays her head down. She closes her eyes. She makes, one more time, the soft, low sound that hadrosaur mothers make to their unhatched young. She does not finish the sound. She dies. Her great body, slumped beside the burning nest, becomes, in the next few minutes, a part of the fire. Her tail catches. Her flanks catch. Her skin, dry from heat, ignites in patches. The whole of her, in the slow, grim accounting of a forest fire, becomes fuel. By the time the fire has finished with her, very little is left. A few bones, the teeth of her lower jaw, the hard core of one of her eggs. These will, in the slow geological passage of time, be buried, compressed, fossilized. They will lie in the rocks of Montana for 66 million years. Eventually, a paleontologist will find them. He will not know that the mother had been singing. He will know only that she had been there, beside her nest, with her young, on the day the world ended. He will write a careful technical paper. He will not be able to say anything about the singing.
But he will, in some way, hear it anyway, because every paleontologist who has ever worked on the KPG boundary has, in the back of their mind, heard the silence of these mothers, 66 million years deep, in the rocks beneath their feet. This is not a story about heroism. The Long Mother was not a hero. She did not save her young. She did not save herself. She did not, by any human standard, succeed at anything. Her death was, in any practical sense, useless. It made no difference to the larger event. It did not slow the impact. It did not preserve her line. It did not, in any way, alter the great wheel of geological catastrophe that was, on that afternoon, grinding the world to powder. But what she did was, in some other way, the only meaningful thing she could have done. She stayed. She was a mother. She had a nest. She had eggs. The world was burning. She did not leave. She did what her species had always done, even though it could not work. She gave her presence to her young, in the only way she knew how, until her body could no longer give anything at all. That, in some way, is the only kind of dignity that any of us ever has. In the face of forces we cannot stop, we have the small choices about what we will do. We have the question of whether we will stay or run. We have the question of whether we will sing or fall silent. We have the question of whether we will hold the hand of whatever creature we love, or whether we will let go of it. The Long Mother held on. That is, in some sense, what makes her worth our telling. That is, in some sense, what makes any creature worth its telling. Let us widen the view again. Let us pull back from the colony, from the burning clearing, from the body of the Long Mother slowly becoming part of the forest she defended. Let us rise. Let us see the world from above, in the long, terrible early evening of the impact. North America is on fire. Not all of it, not uniformly. But large portions of the continent, especially in the regions of the thermal pulse, are now great open burning landscapes. The forests are burning, the grasslands are burning, the dry undergrowth is burning. Smoke columns are rising in the thousands, joining at high altitude into a great rolling haze that is, by this point, beginning to obscure the sun. South America, similar. Central America, where the impact occurred, no longer really exists in any normal sense. The Yucatan is a glowing crater rim. The Caribbean is a vast ring of damaged seabed. The shores of Central America are scoured by the tsunamis, the forests gone, the rivers reversed, the wildlife dead or dying. Africa partially burning, especially the western coast. Europe beginning to burn, especially in the south and west. The northern parts of the continent, including much of what will become Scandinavia, are spared the worst of the thermal pulse and are largely intact, except for the haze and the slow chill that is already beginning. Asia varied. The eastern portions, especially what will become China and Mongolia, are not as severely affected by the thermal pulse. The forests there are largely intact, although the smoke and the haze and the strange light are already beginning to show. The dinosaurs of Eastern Asia, including a number of remarkable theropod species, will survive the first day in better numbers than their American cousins. They will not, however, survive the impact winter, which will affect them as severely as any other region. Antarctica, still green, still forested, still home to its own strange polar dinosaurs and small mammals and amphibians, less affected by the thermal pulse. But, like everywhere else, it is heading into the long cold. The oceans in various states of disruption. The Atlantic, narrower than today, is heavily affected by the impact debris and the tsunamis. The Pacific, larger, is somewhat less affected, but the long-term consequences will be just as severe. The shallow seas, including the western interior seaway, are devastated. The atmosphere, as a whole, is now visibly different. Looking down at the planet from above, you would see the spreading dark haze, the burning, the streaks of high-altitude debris being carried east on the global winds. You would see, in places, the slow brightening of the ocean surface as the falling glass spherules cooled and dimmed. You would see the cloud of the impact column, still rising even now, hours after the contact, having reached the top of the troposphere and now spreading outward in the upper atmosphere. You would see, more than anything else, that something has gone very wrong with the Earth. The Earth, seen from above, has changed color. It has become, on this afternoon, no longer the bright blue and green and white planet it was this morning. It is, instead, a deeper, redder, browner planet. It is, on this afternoon, beginning to look like a different kind of world. Inside the burned forests, smaller stories continue. In a burrow beneath the roots of a fallen log, a small mammal is hiding. She is the same one we mentioned earlier, with her two young curled against her body, breathing the cool air of her tunnel. The forest above her has burned. She does not know this. Her tunnel is far enough below the surface that the temperature inside it has not risen unsurvivably. Her air is recycled through a small opening she dug last year, and that opening, somehow, has not been fully blocked by debris. She is alive. Her young are alive. She is one of the survivors. She does not know it yet. She knows only that the world above her smells terrible, that something has changed, that the small sounds of the surface have stopped, that she should not go up for a while. She is patient. She has spent her life being patient. She will stay below, with her young, for some time. In the meantime, she will eat what she has. She has stored, over the past weeks, a small cache of seeds and dried insects in a side chamber of her burrow. It is not much. It is enough perhaps for several days. After that she will have to go up. She will have to find food in a world that has, for reasons she cannot understand, become a wasteland. She will manage. Many of her kind will manage. The seeds will, in many parts of the planet, survive the burning. They will lie in the soil, waiting for moisture and warmth. The fungi will survive, underground, feeding on dead organic matter. The fungi will be, in some ways, the first great beneficiaries of the impact, because suddenly, the world has been turned into a vast bank of dead biomass for them to consume. The mammal will find seeds. She will find dead insects. She will find, in a few weeks when she dares to surface, that the forest is full of dead bodies that have not yet been consumed by anything, because the things that would have consumed them are also dead. She will eat the dead. This is not, in modern human terms, a pleasant image, but it is the small, unglamorous truth of how survival worked in the days and weeks after the impact. The survivors were small. The survivors were generalists. The survivors could eat anything. The survivors did not need much. The survivors could go a long time without sunlight. The survivors were, in nearly every important way, the underdogs of the Late Cretaceous, the ignored, the unwatched, the despised, the small. And from those underdogs, the next age would come. This is a story that, when we tell it, we often tell with a kind of triumphal arc. We say, the mammals survived. We say, the mammals inherited the earth. We say, the dinosaurs died and we rose. We make of it a moral of a kind, in which the small and patient and underestimated are rewarded by the universe. That is not quite right. The mammals did survive. The mammals did, in time, inherit the earth, in the sense that they radiated into the empty niches left by the dinosaurs and became, over tens of millions of years, the dominant terrestrial vertebrates. But they did not survive because they were better. They did not survive because they deserved to. They did not survive because of any moral arc. They survived because they happened to be small and warm-blooded and burrowing and capable of long fasting and able to eat almost anything on the particular afternoon when those traits became survival traits. If the asteroid had been smaller, the dinosaurs would have survived, and the mammals would have continued to be small nocturnal background characters, and we would not be here. If the asteroid had hit a different place, in a different chemistry of seabed, the climate effects might have been less severe, and the dinosaurs might have made it through, and the world would now belong to feathered things, and we would never have been thought of. If the asteroid had passed by, missing the Earth, the dinosaurs would have continued to evolve, and might have produced, over the next 66 million years, civilizations of their own, or might have produced nothing in particular, but in either case, they would have continued. The mammals did not earn the world.
The mammals were given the world by an accident. This is, in some way, harder to accept than the triumphal arc. We like the triumphal arc. We like to think that we are here because we deserve to be here, that our long climb from the small mammals of the late Cretaceous to the human beings of the present day is a story of patient excellence that the universe has been rewarding for 66 million years.
It is not. It is the story of an accident, followed by 66 million years of consequences. We are the consequences. The day ends. It does not end the way days usually end. There is no sunset, exactly, although the sun has passed below the western horizon. There is, instead, a slow, continuous transition from the bright orange of the early evening to a darker, redder orange, to a deep, dull red, to something close to black, although the sky is never quite black because the burning forests on the continent are throwing enough light into the smoke above to keep the high sky lit with a continuous, diffuse glow. The night, when it arrives, is not night. It is something else. It is a thick, close, hot, smoky, air-filled, lurid not night, in which the smell of burning is constant, in which the sounds of the planet are different from what any animal has ever heard, in which the temperature of the ground itself is warmer than the warmest summer day any of the surviving animals has ever experienced. The animals that are still alive are mostly hiding. The small mammals are in their burrows. The lungfish in the rivers and ponds are buried in the mud at the bottom of their pools. The amphibians, who have always been intimate with the water and the soil, are also in the mud. The lizards, the small ones, are in their crevices, the snakes in their dens. The fungi, of course, are unconcerned. The larger animals, those who have survived this far, are mostly in shock. They are standing where they stood. They are sitting where they sat. They are not eating. They are not sleeping. They are not doing anything, because there is nothing to do. This is the long, terrible, quiet hour of the planet. The hour after the burning has slowed, and before the cold has begun. The hour in which most of the surviving animals come to realize, in their dim animal way, that they are not going to be all right. It is worth pausing here to think about consciousness in the dying world. What did the dinosaurs feel? We do not, of course, know. We cannot know. We do not have access to their experience. We have only the structure of their brains, the analysis of their skull cavities, the inferences we can make from their living descendants and relatives. We have only the small clues, and from those clues we have only a partial picture. But the picture we have is not the picture of unconscious creatures. The dinosaurs were not, by any modern standard, insensate. The larger theropods, including the Tyrannosaurus rex, had brains comparable in some respects to large modern birds, capable of sophisticated behavior, of memory, of recognition, of problem-solving. The hadrosaurs, with their large social colonies and complex parental care, were almost certainly capable of emotional states recognizable to any modern person who has watched a flock of geese in distress. The dromaeosaurs, the small, clever raptors, were probably as smart as modern crows, which is to say, very smart indeed. These were not unconscious creatures. These were conscious creatures, with their own internal lives, with their own perceptions of fear and contentment and curiosity and grief. And they were dying. They were dying in the millions. They were dying confused. They were dying without context, without explanation, without any framework for what was happening to them. They were dying with the small, private experience of dying that every conscious creature has, with the small, private terror of dying that every conscious creature feels. The end of the dinosaurs was not, as it is sometimes told in textbooks, a clean biological event. It was a slow, drawn-out catastrophe that involved the conscious distress of an enormous number of intelligent or near-intelligent animals over the course of months and years. That is something we do not, in the modern accounting of the impact, always allow ourselves to feel. The numbers are too large. The species are too foreign. The time is too remote.
But the suffering was real. It was as real as any suffering that has ever happened in the history of the Earth. And it lasted, in various forms, for a long time.
The first days after the impact are the worst, by some measures, because the immediate physical violence of the event is still happening. The fires are still burning. The ash is still falling. The seas are still convulsed. The temperatures in many places are still extreme. By the end of the first week, however, the violence has begun to subside. The fires have, in most places, burned themselves out. There is not much left to burn. The forests that were going to burn have burned. The grasslands that were going to burn have burned. The drier biomes are now landscapes of black ash, dotted with the bodies of dead animals, occasionally still smoking. The skies have not cleared, however. The skies have, if anything, darkened.
This is because the dust and the soot and the sulfur compounds in the upper atmosphere have been spreading outward from the impact site and from the burning regions and from the various secondary sources of debris that the impact created. The high atmosphere, by the end of the first week, is opaque over most of the planet. Sunlight cannot get through. The sun, when it tries to shine, is reduced to a dim disk, often invisible behind the thick, high haze. The temperature beneath the haze has begun to drop. This is not, at first, a dramatic drop. It is gradual. It is the slow draining of the warmth from the air, as the sunlight that has been warming the planet for billions of years is, for the first time in a very long while, cut off. By the end of the first month, the surface temperatures have dropped significantly. By the end of the first season, they have dropped further. By the end of the first year, large portions of the planet are experiencing temperatures that the local fauna and flora have never had to endure. This is the impact winter. This is the long second death. Picture now the world a year after the impact. The fires are out. The skies are dark. The seas are calmer. The earthquakes have largely subsided, although small aftershocks continue. The tsunamis are long past. The immediate physical violence of the event is, in some sense, over. But the world is dying. It is dying slowly. In the dim chill, in the absence of sunlight, in the slow withering of the plants that have, in many regions, lost most of their photosynthetic capacity. The plants that survived the fires are now dying from the cold and the dark. The animals that survived the fires are now dying from the cold and the lack of food. The hadrosaurs, in the regions where the colonies were not entirely destroyed, are walking through forests that no longer feed them. They are emaciated. Their great bodies, designed for the abundant plant life of the Late Cretaceous, cannot maintain themselves on the small quantities of struggling vegetation that remain. They are dying, one by one, on the long, slow trails of their migrations. The juveniles are dying first. The males are dying next. The old females are dying last, although they are also dying, eventually. The triceratops are similarly dying. The old bull from our story has long since collapsed, in a clearing many kilometers from where we last saw him, after a winter of slow exhaustion. His family has by then dispersed, the adults scattered in various directions in search of food, the juveniles taken by smaller predators who themselves are not far from dying. The whole great social structure of the Late Cretaceous herding species is dissolving. The Tyrannosaurus rex, the great predator, is also dying. He has lasted longer than many of his prey species because his body fat reserves were substantial, and because he is good at scavenging. But by the end of the first year, the scavenging is no longer productive. The dead bodies have rotted or been consumed by the smaller scavengers. The living prey is no longer to be found. The Tyrannosaurus, who has spent his entire life as the apex of his ecosystem, is now starving in a world that has run out of meat. He lies down eventually in a thicket of dead trees and does not get up again. The small predators, the dromaeosaurs and the troodontids, last longer than their larger cousins because they need less food. They eat the small mammals and the small lizards and the small dying things that are everywhere. They eat each other sometimes. They are, for a while, the last avatars of dinosaurian dominance, the small, clever, feathered hunters scampering through the wreckage of their world. But they too die, eventually. They die because their prey species die. They die because the ecosystem cannot sustain them. They die because there is, in the end, no place for them in a world without sun.
By the end of the second year, the great non-avian dinosaur lineages are essentially gone. There are still, perhaps, a few individuals here and there, a juvenile triceratops in a sheltered valley, a small theropod still hunting along a particular river, an old hadrosaur still wandering. They are not, however, populations. They are individuals. They cannot reproduce. They cannot maintain a species. They are walking ghosts. By the end of the third year, even the ghosts are gone. The mammals continue. It is hard to overstate how strange this is. The mammals had been, for 160 million years, the supporting cast of life on Earth. The mammals had been small, nocturnal, marginal. The mammals had been the audience for the great dinosaurian drama, the background extras in the long pageant of giant reptilian success. And then, in 3 years, the great pageant ends, and the mammals are still there. They are not, in those first 3 years, doing anything impressive. They are still small. They are still nocturnal. They are still hiding. They are still eating seeds and insects and the bodies of dead things. They are, by any standard, the same modest creatures they were before the impact. But the dinosaurs are gone, and they are not. That, in evolutionary terms, is what matters. Over the next few thousand years, as the impact winter slowly lifts, as the dust falls out of the high atmosphere, as the sun returns in something approaching its old brightness, the mammals begin to do new things. Some of them begin to come out during the day, because the day is no longer dangerous. Some of them begin to grow larger, because there are no longer large predators to threaten them. Some of them begin to specialize, evolving in directions that, in the previous world, would have led directly to being eaten. The radiation of the mammals begins. It will, over the next 66 million years, produce all the mammals that have ever lived since. It will produce the early hoofed animals who will, in time, become the horses, the cattle, the antelopes, the deer. It will produce the early carnivores who will, in time, become the cats and the dogs and the bears. It will produce the early primates who will, in time, become the monkeys and the apes and us. It will produce the early whales who will return to the sea and become the largest animals the earth has ever had. It will produce the bats who will inherit the air that the pterosaurs vacated. It will produce, in the end, this conversation, this script, this evening, this particular point of consciousness in this particular brain, in the body of this particular descendant of those particular small, late Cretaceous burrowers. The impact made us possible. That is the strangest thing about it. We do not always think about this, but it is worth thinking about. If the asteroid had missed, we would not exist. There would be no humans, there would be no mammals in any large form. There would still be dinosaurs, presumably, and there would still be life, presumably, and the planet would still be doing its slow geological work, presumably. But we would not be here. The single most disastrous event in the history of complex life is also the event that made our existence possible. Every breath we draw is, in some sense, drawn from the air that became breathable to us because the dinosaurs left it. Every meal we eat is, in some sense, made of biomass that our lineage was only able to access because the great herbivores of the Cretaceous left their niches empty. Every thought we have is, in some sense, thought by neurons in a brain that exists only because a particular asteroid, on a particular morning, 66 million years ago, hit a particular part of a particular planet. That is not a comfortable thought. It does not give us a comfortable place in the moral universe. We did not earn the world by being virtuous. We inherited the world by being lucky. The earth that we walk on, the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, the cities that we have built, the songs that we have sung, the people that we have loved, all of it rests, ultimately, on the unmarked grave of an afternoon in which most of the life on this planet died, in agonizing ways, for no reason connected to anything they had done. That is the foundation we are standing on. It does not mean anything is bad. It does not mean we should feel guilty. It does not mean we should renounce our lives or our species. It only means that we should, perhaps, occasionally remember. We are here on accident. The dinosaurs were not less deserving of being here. They were just unluckier. Let us return now to the Long Mother one last time. She has been dead, in the story we are telling, for some time. Her body has been consumed by the fire. Her bones have begun the slow process of being covered, of being compressed, of being chemically transformed into something else. Her clearing has burned itself out. The colony around her is silent. If you had walked into the clearing a week after her death, you would have seen ash and bones. The trees, half burned, would still be standing in places, blackened, their charred branches stretched upward into a sky that no longer had clouds, that had instead the deep gray haze of the impact winter. The bones of the Long Mother would have been visible if you knew where to look. The skull, half blackened, with its long flat beak partly intact. The vertebrae of her spine, in a curve that suggested she had laid down on her side at the end. The teeth, separated from the lower jaw, scattered around the area where her head had been. The eggs, in the nest, would have been mostly destroyed. A few shell fragments would have remained. Most of them would have been crushed by falling debris, or consumed by smaller scavengers in the days after the fire, or simply scattered. 16 eggs, 16 unhatched young, 16 small futures that, on the morning of the impact, were still possible. None of them, in the end. It is the small, private, specific arithmetic of extinction that haunts those who study it. Not the species numbers, not the percentages. Those are abstractions. The small, private, specific arithmetic is the question of how many individual eggs went unhatched, how many individual hatchlings went unfed, how many mothers spent their last hours doing exactly what the Long Mother did, in exactly the same useless, beautiful way. Multiply her by every nesting hadrosaur on the continent. Multiply her by every brooding theropod. Multiply her by every triceratops calf still nursing from its mother, by every mosasaur juvenile still learning to hunt, by every pterosaur chick still in its rookery, by every small, wet, alive thing on the planet that was about to do whatever it was about to do next. Multiply her by all of them. That number is the number of small, private, specific stories that ended on the day of the impact and the years that followed. That number is, by any measure, the saddest number in the history of life on Earth. It is also, in some way, the number that produced us. We are the dividend. The dinosaurs are the dividend's price. 66 million years pass. That is, again, a number the mind cannot easily hold. We have already said it once. We will say it again now, slowly, because it deserves to be said slowly. 66 million years. Long enough for entire continents to drift to new positions. Long enough for the Atlantic Ocean to widen significantly. Long enough for new mountain ranges to form. Long enough for the Himalayas to rise out of the collision of India with Asia. Long enough for entire species lineages to come and go many times over. Long enough for the slow, gradual transformation of the early small mammals into rodents, into bats, into hoofed creatures, into whales, into primates, into us. 66 million years. That is how long it has been since the Long Mother died beside her nest. During that time, no one was thinking about her. There was no one to think about her for most of it. The mammals who were her contemporary survivors did not remember her. They did not have the cognitive capacity for memory of that kind, and even if they had not known her. The early primates, much later, did not think about her either. The early human ancestors, walking the African savannas, did not think about her. The early modern humans, painting their caves and burying their dead, did not think about her. The early civilizations, building their walls and their gods, did not think about her. For 66 million years, no one thought about the Long Mother. For 66 million years, she was simply gone, with no one alive who knew that she had ever been. Then, in the small, specific recent moment of recorded human history, in the last few hundred years, certain people began to dig in the rocks. They found bones. They found teeth. They found, eventually, eggs. They found, eventually, the patterns of nesting colonies.
They found eventually the boundary layer with its iridium and its glass and its carbon. They began to assemble, in their slow, patient, careful way, the picture of what had happened. And in that picture, the Long Mother appeared again, not as herself, not as the specific individual hadrosaur with the particular 16 eggs that we have been imagining, but as a type, as a presence, as the recognizable shape of a mother on a nest, in a clearing, on a day that ended badly. The picture is, of course, incomplete. The picture is full of guesses. The picture is full of the small invented specificities that paleontologists and storytellers use to make the bones speak. But the picture is, in its broad shape, real. She existed. Some hadrosaur like her was there. She had a nest, she had eggs, she had a body. She had, for the brief duration of her life, the specific small private particular reality of being a mother on a planet that was about to end. And someone, eventually, listened for her. That is, in some way, the only resurrection any of us ever gets. There is a town now in the part of Mexico where the impact occurred. The town is called Chicxulub, and it is small, and it is unremarkable in most of the ways that small towns are unremarkable. It has a few thousand inhabitants, it has a port, it has fishermen, it has children walking to school in the mornings, carrying small bags, calling to each other in Spanish, kicking small stones along the dusty streets. It has, in its central plaza, a few palm trees and a few benches, and a few quiet old men who have been sitting on those benches for years and will continue to sit on those benches for years more. None of them, while sitting there, are thinking about the asteroid. They have no reason to think about it. It is not, in any normal day, a thing that crosses the mind. It is invisible. It is buried beneath their feet, beneath the limestone that has accumulated over 66 million years, beneath the slow, patient work of all the small creatures whose calcium has been pressed into the rock above it. But it is there. Beneath the streets of the town, beneath the seafloor offshore, beneath the patient, slow drilling of certain scientific expeditions that have, over the past few decades, dropped careful cores down into the buried structure of the crater, the asteroid's signature is preserved. The melt rock is there. The shocked quartz is there. The peak ring of uplifted material that all very large impact craters have is there, although it is, by now, almost half a kilometer down. The scar, in other words, has not healed. It has only been covered. That is a very particular kind of memory, the geological kind. The Earth does not forget. The Earth does not move on. The Earth, in its slow, patient way, keeps everything. Every great event that has ever happened on this planet is recorded in the rocks, somewhere, in some form, available to anyone who knows how to read the language. The KPG boundary is, in this sense, a kind of letter. It is a letter from a particular afternoon, written in dust and glass and carbon and iridium, sealed under layers of younger rock for 66 million years, and then opened by people who have only recently learned how to read it. The first person to read it, properly, was a man named Walter Alvarez. Walter Alvarez was a geologist. His father, Luis Alvarez, was a physicist, a Nobel laureate, a man with a long career of working on improbable problems. The two of them, father and son, began in the late 1970s to look at a particular thin layer of clay in a rock formation in Italy near the small town of Gubbio. The clay was strange. It separated, with a sharp, clean line, the rocks containing late Cretaceous fossils from the rocks containing the very different fossils of the period that followed. There were no late Cretaceous fossils above the clay. There were no early Paleogene fossils below it. The clay was, in some way, the moment. But what was the clay? They analyzed it. They analyzed it for many things. They found something they did not expect. They found a high concentration of iridium. Iridium is an element. It is rare on the surface of the Earth because most of it sank into the core when the planet was still molten, billions of years ago. The amount of iridium in ordinary surface rocks is very small. The amount in the clay at Gubbio was about 30 times higher than normal. That is not a small difference. The Alvarezes considered the possibilities. They tried at first to explain the iridium with terrestrial sources. None of them worked. Iridium does not come out of volcanoes in those quantities. Iridium does not come out of any normal geological process in those quantities. There was only one thing that, as far as they knew, contained iridium in roughly those proportions. Asteroids. The clay at Gubbio, they proposed, contained the dust of an asteroid that had hit the Earth at the end of the Cretaceous. The impact had thrown the iridium up into the atmosphere, distributed it globally, and then deposited it as a thin, worldwide layer of dust. They published the paper in 1980. It was, at the time, controversial. Many geologists did not accept it. There were alternative explanations. There were, especially, paleontologists who had spent their careers building gradualist models of the dinosaur extinction, in which the dinosaurs had slowly declined over millions of years, and who did not appreciate the idea that the whole event had been compressed into an afternoon. The controversy lasted for many years. It was settled, more or less, by the discovery of the crater. The crater had been discovered earlier, in fact, but had not been recognized as a crater. Oil company geologists working in the Yucatan in the 1960s had noticed a strange circular pattern in the magnetic and gravitational anomalies of the buried rocks. They had not known what to make of it. They had filed it away. It was only in the 1990s, after the Alvarez's work had become widely known, that someone went back to those old surveys and recognized what they were looking at. A 200-kilometer-wide crater buried under the surface in exactly the right rocks for the iridium layer in exactly the right age. The Chicxulub crater. The case was, after that, very difficult to dispute. We do not, of course, know everything. The exact mechanism of the extinction is still being worked out. The relative contributions of the thermal pulse, the impact winter, the wildfires, the ocean acidification, and the various other consequences of the impact are still being debated. There are scientists who think the eruptions of the Deccan Traps, a series of massive volcanic events in what is now India that were happening around the same time, also played a role. There are scientists who think the impact was the primary cause, with the volcanism being a smaller contributor. There are scientists in between. What is no longer in dispute is that the impact happened. What is no longer in dispute is that it was the proximate cause of the end of the dinosaurs. What is no longer in dispute is that the world we live in is, in a real and detailed way, the world that the impact left behind. That is, in some ways, the most extraordinary inheritance any species has ever had. We are the inheritors of an empty room. We are the small mice who, when the dinner party ended, came out of the walls and discovered that the food was still on the table. We are not blameless for what we have done with it, but we are not, originally, the ones who set it. We came into a vacated world. We did not, at first, know it had been vacated. It is only in the recent decades, only in the last lifetime or so, that we have come to understand the magnitude of what happened, and the fact that we are walking through the very specific aftermath of one specific afternoon's catastrophe. That is a lot to carry. We do not always carry it. We are not always aware of carrying it. But it is, in the deepest geological sense, the foundation of our existence. Let us, before we close, think about the meaning of all this, not the scientific meaning. The scientific meaning is, in many ways, settled, or at least settling. The asteroid hit, the dinosaurs died, the mammals rose, the Earth recovered, in time, into the world we now live in. But the other meaning, the meaning that has nothing to do with science, the meaning that has to do with what it is like to be a conscious creature thinking about this, 66 million years after the fact. That meaning is, in some way, harder. Because what the impact tells us, more than anything else, is that the world we walk on is not stable. We tend to imagine it as stable. We tend to imagine the trees and the rivers and the cities and the seasons as permanent fixtures of the universe, the way a child imagines that the room they were born in will always be there. We tend to imagine the species that surround us, the elephants and the whales and the songbirds and the bees, as a kind of furniture. They have always been there. They will always be there. The world is the world. The world is not the world. The world has been many worlds. The world has been, in its long 4.5 billion year history, more different versions of itself than any single mind can hold. It has been a sterile ball of rock. It has been a steaming hot magma planet. It has been a world covered in oceans full of single-celled life.
It has been a world full of strange Cambrian creatures whose body plans we no longer have words for. It has been a world ruled by amphibians, by reptiles, by mammal-like reptiles, by early dinosaurs, by late dinosaurs, by mammals, by us. It has been, in some long, unimaginable time to come, worlds we cannot predict, ruled by lineages we cannot guess, full of creatures whose bodies and behaviors and intelligences will be as strange to anything we know as we are to the long mother on her nest. The world is not a fixed background. The world is a process. The world is, more than anything else, in motion. And the motion, sometimes, is fast.
The end of the dinosaurs is the most famous reminder of how fast that motion can be. One afternoon, one bad bit of orbital mathematics, one asteroid in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the entire ecological structure of the planet rearranged. We have not had another impact of that size since. We have, of course, no guarantee that we will not. The solar system is not empty. The asteroid belt is, even now, full of objects that, if they were deflected the right way, would do what Chicxulub did. The orbits of those objects are calculated and tracked, increasingly carefully, by various national and international programs. The risk on any given year is small. The risk over the long term is not zero. We are also, of course, having other extinction events. The current extinction event, the one humans are causing, is not the same as Chicxulub. It is, in some ways, slower. It is, in some ways, more selective. It is, in some ways, more our fault. But the rates of species loss, in the current period of human dominance, are comparable in magnitude to the rates of loss in some of the great extinctions of the past. The biologists who study this have not invented the comparison. The comparison is what the data shows. We are not, of course, going to disappear ourselves overnight in the way the dinosaurs did. There is no asteroid heading for us that we know of. There is no single catastrophic event that we can identify in our near future. We are, instead, doing the kind of slow, drawn-out extinction work that takes centuries. But many species are going. The orange-bellied parrot, the Sumatran rhinoceros, the vaquita, the Iberian lynx, although that one is recovering somewhat. The amphibians of the world, broadly. The insects of the world, increasingly. The fish of the world, especially the large ones. The coral reefs, the old-growth forests. These are not individually the dinosaurs, but they are collectively the kind of loss that 66 million years from now will leave a layer in the rocks that some future geologist of some future species will examine and ask what happened. The KPG boundary is 66 million years old. The Anthropocene boundary, if there is one, will be, in some far time, the same kind of recording of the same kind of catastrophe. That is one of the more uncomfortable parallels we have to live with. But this is not, perhaps, the most important thing to say at the end. The most important thing to say at the end is, perhaps, more personal. The most important thing to say at the end is that we are, all of us, in some way, the long mother. We are creatures who love specific things. We are creatures who care for specific small, warm, wet, alive things, whether those things are our children, our pets, our gardens, our partners, our friends, the small, specific habits and possessions that make up the body of our days. We are creatures who, in the great long history of the planet, have specific small bowls of eggs that we are, in our way, sitting beside. We do not know, on any given morning, whether that morning is the last morning. We rarely think about it. We have, in our human way, developed an enormous machinery for not thinking about it. We have philosophies. We have religions. We have routines. We have, in particular, the small everyday business of getting through each day, which has the effect, often, of making us forget that each day is, in its own small way, a complete miracle. An unrepeatable specific moment in the long history of the universe in which we, briefly, happen to be alive. The long mother did not know it was her last morning. We do not know, on any given morning, whether it is ours. That sounds perhaps more grim than it is meant to. It is not grim. It is, in a strange way, hopeful, because what it means is that this morning, the one you are watching this video on, the one you are listening to this voice in, the one you are in right now in whatever room you are in, is real. It is here. It is yours for a while. The light coming through the window is real. The chair you are sitting on is real. The breath in your lungs is real. The slow, patient, warm, specific reality of being a conscious creature in this place on this evening is real. The dinosaurs had it too. For 160 million years they had it, and then they did not. And the small mammals who survived them had it, and the early primates after them had it, and eventually, after a very long time, we had it, and we have it now. This morning, this evening, this moment, you have it. The Long Mother, if she could somehow speak to us across the gulf of 66 million years, would not have anything especially profound to say. She did not have the cognitive equipment for profound statements. She was a hadrosaur. She had a brain about the size of a large grapefruit. She did not think in language. She did not think in concepts. She did not think in the long form that we think in. But she had, in her old, patient body, a knowledge that was older than language. She had the knowledge of how to stand over a nest. She had the knowledge of how to feel warm earth beneath one's feet and know that it was good. She had the knowledge of how to make a soft sound at one's young, even when the young could not hear, even when the young were inside eggs, even when the soft sound was, in the end, the only thing you had left to give them. That knowledge is older than us. That knowledge is older than mammals. That knowledge is older than dinosaurs. That knowledge is, in some way, as old as life itself. It is the knowledge that being alive means caring for some small, warm, specific thing, and that the caring is, in itself, the meaning. She had that knowledge. We have it too. We share, in some odd cross-temporal way, this one piece of being alive with her. She loved her eggs in some hadrosaur way. We love our specific small things in our human way. The mechanism is the same. The structure is the same. The patience is the same. The willingness, if necessary, to stay beside the thing one loves when the world is burning is the same. We will, most of us, not have to make that choice in any literal sense. But we have already made it, in smaller ways, many times. We have stayed up with a sick child. We have sat with a dying parent. We have not abandoned a friend when it would have been easier to. We have, in the small private hours, done the long, patient, unglamorous work of being there, of staying, of holding on to whatever it is that we love. That is the Long Mother's gift, if she has one to give. She is gone. Her eggs are gone. Her colony is gone. Her species is gone. But the gesture remains. The gesture in some way has been passed on. The gesture is older than her species, and has outlived her species, and will outlive ours, and will outlive whatever species comes after ours, because the gesture is something that life itself has been making for as long as life has existed. That is, in some way, what the dinosaurs leave us. Not just the bones, not just the rocks, not just the museum exhibits with the careful reconstructions and the careful labels. The gesture, the willingness to stay, the willingness to love specific small warm things in a universe that does not, by any reasonable measure, owe them love. The day is, in our story, finally over. The night is full of strange light. The forest is full of strange smells. The colony is empty. The Long Mother is dead. The Tyrannosaurus Rex is dying. The Triceratops bull is dying. The pterosaurs are dead. The mosasaurs are dying. The mammals are in their burrows. The Earth, which has been alive in a particular way for 160 million years, has, in a single afternoon, become a different kind of alive. It will, in time, become a third kind of alive. That third kind of alive is ours. The third kind has, by now, built cities. The third kind has, by now, learned to read the rocks. The third kind has, by now, looked back at the second kind and asked,
with a kind of horror and a kind of awe, "What happened to you?" We are still asking. We will, perhaps, always be asking. It is one of the things our species does. We look back, we dig up, we piece together. We try, with our small, clever minds, to imagine the warm, specific lives of the creatures who came before us. And we try to understand what it was like, on the last morning, to be a creature who did not know it was the last morning. We cannot, of course, know. We can only imagine. But the imagining is, in itself, a form of remembering. The imagining is, in itself, a kind of resurrection, the only kind that, in the strict physical universe we live in, anyone ever gets. The Long Mother in this script has been resurrected. She has been given a few hours of being thought about by us, 66 million years after she stopped being thought about by anyone. That is, in some way, the only gift we can give the dead. We can think about them. We can give them, in our minds, the warm, specific, particular consideration that they had, in their own time, for the warm, specific, particular things in their own lives. That is what this story has been. A long, slow, careful consideration of a particular kind of life on a particular kind of planet in a particular kind of afternoon given by us, the small descendants of the smaller creatures who, by accident, lived through that afternoon. It is, in some way, the least we owe them. There is a stretch of rock in the Badlands of Montana where you can put your hand on a particular thin layer of clay and know, with reasonable certainty, that what you are touching is the moment. The moment. The thin band of dust and iridium and glass and carbon that is, in its specific physical reality, the afternoon we have been describing. You can drive there, you can hike to the spot, you can squat down and run your fingers along the layer and feel the small grainy texture of it. Above the layer is one world. Below the layer is a different world. The layer is, in its way, the most consequential single physical object on the entire planet. It is the line. It is the wound. It is the boundary between the world the dinosaurs lived in and the world we live in. It is also, of course, just clay. It is also, of course, just a few centimeters of brown sediment. But it is the few centimeters that contain everything. Some people, when they visit the site, are silent for a long time. Some people leave small things at the layer, small offerings, the way people leave small offerings at memorials. Some people simply touch the layer, briefly, and stand up and walk away, and try to remember what it was like. It is not a famous place, in the way that the Grand Canyon is famous. It is not a tourist destination. It is just a particular outcrop of rock, in a particular landscape of badlands, in a particular county of a particular state, in a particular country, on a particular planet. But it is, in its specific small way, one of the most sacred places on Earth. It is the small, thin line where, 66 million years ago, on a particular afternoon, almost everything that had been alive on this planet stopped being alive. If you ever go, go quietly. The dead are very old. They have been dead a long time. They do not need any drama from us. They need only to be remembered, to be noticed, to have, in some small way, the simple acknowledgement that they were here. We are at the end of this long telling. It has been, in the way that long tellings always are, only one telling among many possible tellings. There are other angles. There are other characters. There are other details. There are scientific debates we have not entered. There are paleontologists whose work we have not credited. There are nuances we have flattened, simplifications we have allowed, small inaccuracies we have probably committed in service of the larger emotional truth. It is, in any case, a small offering. It is, in any case, an attempt. The dinosaurs were here for a very long time. They were magnificent. They were diverse. They were intelligent, many of them. They were tender, many of them. They were, in their long, quiet way, simply themselves, doing what they did in a world that suited them. And then, in one afternoon, they were not. And in the rocks beneath your feet, wherever you were sitting tonight, the residue of that afternoon is still preserved, waiting patiently, as it has waited for 66 million years, for someone to think about it. You have thought about it, now. For a few hours, you have given it your attention. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, very nearly the most we can give to anything. Imagine, one more time, the long mother. She is standing over her nest in the warm green morning before any of this has happened. The sun is gentle. The cycads are humming with insects.
The river is flowing softly behind her. Her 16 eggs are warm. The other mothers of the colony are around her, settling into their own mornings. The forest, beyond the clearing, is full of the small, ongoing sounds of life. The sky is blue. She does not look at the sky. She has no reason to look at the sky. She lowers her head, slowly, and presses her chin against the rim of her nest, and feels the warmth of the eggs through her body. She is, in this moment, simply alive. That is what we are leaving her with. Not the burning, not the running, not the slow, terrible afternoon. Just this. Just the morning. Just the moment before anything has gone wrong, when she is exactly where she belongs, doing exactly what her species was made to do, in the warm, specific, quiet ordinariness of being a hadrosaur on a planet that, for a few more hours, is still hers. She does not know. She does not need to know. She is, in this last imaginative moment, allowed to be simply herself, in the warm morning, beside her nest, before the sky. That is, in some way, the kindest thing we can do for her, to leave her in our minds in the morning, to not insist that she walk all the way to the end of her day every time we think of her, to let her have, in this script, in this evening, in this small, specific moment of our attention, simply the warm, clear, good ordinariness of being alive. She had that. For her entire life, she had that. And in some way, however long ago, however different her body, however alien her experience, she had what we have, and we have what she had. And the small thread of being alive runs from her to us across 66 million years without breaking once. It is late in whatever room you are in. The story is almost over. Outside your window, somewhere, the sky is doing what skies have always done. It is blue or gray or starry or cloudy. There may be birds in it. Birds, as it happens, are the surviving descendants of the dinosaurs. The small, clever theropods that were not killed by the impact, the ones whose lineage made it through the long winter, became, over the next 66 million years, the birds. The robin in the garden, the sparrow on the rooftop, the hawk circling high above the field, the duck on the pond, the goose flying south for the winter. Every one of them, every single one, is a dinosaur. Not a metaphorical dinosaur, a literal dinosaur. The exact same lineage, the exact same biological story. The small surviving fringe of the Great Cretaceous family, still here, still flying, still calling in the mornings. The dinosaurs did not entirely die. They became smaller. They became feathered, mostly, although they had been feathered before. They became, in time, the lineage of bright, clever, beautiful flying things that we share the sky with now, and that, when we hear them in the mornings, we do not, usually, think of as dinosaurs. But they are. That song you sometimes hear, in the trees at dawn, that is what is left of the long mother's world. That is the only surviving voice from the colony. The next time you hear a bird in the morning, listen for a moment longer than you usually do. That song is older than you can imagine. The lineage that makes that song has been making sounds in the morning for hundreds of millions of years. The bird singing it is the direct descendant of creatures who shared the warm, specific, quiet ordinariness of being alive with the long mother. The bird singing it carries, in its tiny body, the unbroken thread of a story that began long before the impact, and survived through the impact,
and continued through the slow recovery, and through the rise of mammals, and through the rise of primates, and through the rise of humans, and through the rise of cities, and through the long, strange, recent moments of human history, and is now, in this moment, in your garden, in your window, in your morning, singing. It is the same song. Not literally, of course. The notes have changed. The species have changed. But the singing has been continuous. The being alive has been continuous. The lineage has not broken. The dinosaurs are not, in the strictest sense, gone. A small bright corner of them is still here. It is singing in your trees. It will sing in your trees tomorrow morning. This has been the story of one day. Not the kind of day you would have wanted to live through. Not the kind of day you would wish on any creature, anywhere, in any age. But it was nonetheless a day. It happened. It was real. It was endured, in their various ways, by all the creatures who happened to be alive when it happened. They lived through their pieces of it. They died through their pieces of it. They did not, any of them, ask for it. They did not, any of them, deserve it. They had it anyway. That is, in some way, what the day teaches. We do not always get to choose what comes for us. We do not always get to choose when our specific morning becomes the last morning. We can only choose, in the small, private, particular moments we have, what to do with the time we are given. The long mother chose to stay. Most of the dinosaurs, in their various ways, chose to stay too. Some ran, some hid. Some kept doing what they had always done, until the end. None of them knew in the way we know what was happening. None of them had the framework. None of them had the science. None of them had the long retrospective view that we, 66 million years later, can finally have. We have it now, and we have, with that view, the choice of what to do with the time we are given. We can ignore it. Most of us, most of the time, do. We can panic. Some of us, sometimes, do. We can also, in the small, private, specific moments we have, simply do what the long mother did. We can stay with what we love. We can give attention to what we are given. We can make the soft sounds, in whatever language we have, that we are able to make, to the small, specific, warm things that depend on us. That is, in the end, not a small thing. It is, in some way, the only thing. Wherever you are, in whatever country, in whatever weather, in whatever room, in whatever hour, may you sleep gently when you sleep tonight. May the air in your room be the air you trust. May the people you love, if there are people you love, be safe. May the small, warm, specific things in your life, the cup on your table, the chair by your window, the book on your shelf, the pet at your feet, the small, particular textures of being you, be there in the morning. They will not always be. Not because of an asteroid, probably. Just because nothing is forever, and even the small, particular textures of our days are part of the slow, patient passing of the universe. The same passing that carried away the long mother and the colony and the great pageant of the Cretaceous. Knowing that does not have to make us sad. It can, instead, make us pay attention. It can make us, on the small specific mornings we have, look up at the trees and the sky and the people in our rooms with the small private kindness of someone who knows that this, here, now, is the actual thing, the actual life, the actual specific, irreplaceable, warm reality of being conscious on a planet that is, against all odds, still alive enough to support us. The dinosaurs had it. For 160 million years they had it. We have it now. That is the gift. That is what the long mother, if she could speak, might say. Not be afraid, not anything dramatic, only this: notice. Notice the morning. Notice the trees. Notice the bird in the garden, who is, by the way, your distant cousin. Notice the small, specific, warm ordinariness of being here, on this planet, on this day, with the people you love,
with the things you have, in the warm, specific, quiet ordinariness of being alive. Notice, because the morning is, in the end, the only thing any of us has. And the dinosaurs had a long, beautiful, complicated, magnificent morning for a very long time before it ended. And we are having ours now. Thank you for walking with me through this long, quiet, difficult day. Thank you for being patient with the slow telling. Thank you for caring about creatures who lived and died 66 million years before any of us were born, on a planet whose continents were in different positions, under a sky we cannot quite reconstruct, in a world we will only ever know through bones. That care, that patience, that long, quiet attention you have given to creatures who never imagined an audience like you, is the kind of thing that, in some small way, makes the universe slightly better. Not because the universe needs us to make it better. The universe is indifferent. The universe does not care. The universe is, by any honest measure, just a very large arrangement of physics. But we, the small conscious creatures who happen to live inside this very large arrangement of physics, can care. We can give attention. We can remember. We can think about the long mother 66 million years after she lay down beside her nest and stopped breathing. That thinking, that remembering, is, in some way, the small but real way that creatures like us push back, briefly, against the indifference of the cosmos. We do not change the cosmos. We change ourselves. We become, by remembering, more conscious of our own small specific position in the long, slow pageant of life on Earth. We become, by remembering, the kind of creatures who can hold a moment of silence for the dead, even when the dead are so old that no one alive has ever known them. That is the gift of human consciousness in some way. We are the species that can remember the long mother. We are the species that can give her, 66 million years late, the small, warm, specific, quiet attention that she once gave her eggs. That is not nothing. That is, in some way, almost everything. Wherever you are tonight, in whatever room, in whatever country, in whatever weather, may you sleep gently. May the sky above you be the sky you trust. May the morning, when it comes again, find you well. May the small, specific, warm, ordinary things of your life be where you left them. May the people you love be near you, or, if they are far, may they be safe. May the bird in the garden, when it sings, find you listening. This has been a long story. It is the story of one day 66 million years ago. It is also, in some other way, the story of all our days, and all the days that have ever been, and all the days that will ever be, on this small specific planet, in this small specific corner of the universe, where consciousness, against all odds, has continued, in one form or another, for a very long time, and may continue, in some form or another, for a very long time more. For now, it is yours. For now, the morning is yours. For now, the trees, the birds, the air, the warm, specific ordinariness of being alive are yours while they are yours. Hold them gently. Notice them when you can. And when the morning comes again, as it always does, give it, for a moment, the small, specific, quiet attention it deserves. Sleep well. The dinosaurs had their long morning. We are having ours. When you wake up, the bird in the garden will be the small, bright, surviving voice of their long-ago colony, and it will be singing, and you will, perhaps, hear it differently than you used to. That is what stories like this one are for. Not to frighten us with what was lost, but to wake us gently to what is still here. Good night. We will meet again in the next quiet hour.